It is 6:01 p.m. and I'd like to call the July 18th, 2018 meeting of the San Francisco Election Commission to order. Secretary Chan, please take the roll call.
President Roger Donaldson.
Here.
Donaldson present. Vice President Viva Mogi.
Here.
Mogi present. Commissioner Charlotte Hill is absent. Commissioner Chris Giordanic.
Here.
Giordanic here. Commissioner Charles Jung.
Here.
Jung here. Commissioner Joe Rowe.
Here.
Rowe here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Second item, please.
Item 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Election Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda.
Any public comment? Seeing no members of the public coming forward, next item, please.
Item 3, June 5th, 2018 election. Discussion and possible action regarding conduct of the June 5th, 2018 consolidated direct primary election.
Very good. So we'll start off by mentioning that we did a review of the election at the BOPEC meeting, which we had a special BOPEC meeting last Friday. Commissioner Jung and myself were present and reviewed the items, the election results and various items. At that meeting, we recommended to the commission, or there was a motion, and we unanimously agreed that we would recommend to the commission that that the full commission pass a motion to certify, or I guess endorse the election as free and fair. And anything to add, Commissioner Jung? Okay. Just a few things to point out. There were some things that did come up in the BOPEC meeting that had to do with, Commissioner Jung pointed out that in the incidents, there were quite a number where the serial numbers did not match to the original bags. However, that was noted by the director as having been an issue with them being written down incorrectly, and it was not abnormally high. We did not consider that to be a reason not to find that the election was free and fair. Additionally, a late analysis, it was not at BOPEC, but sent today, that is now included in the information pack. Here is a memo from myself, having gone through some of the details of the results and asking questions about some things that I tried to reconcile and pointed out to the director, and he responded, and this does not change my opinion in any way, but it does clarify certain discrepancies in terms of, or apparent discrepancies in the statement of vote. Well, there are discrepancies, but explains them to, I think, adequately for my purposes. I would say the one last comment I would have there is that I would like to hear from the director if there is a way to break out something that would match the statement of, or excuse me, the ballot statement that at the precinct, and the difference between the ballot statement and any additional provisional ballots or same-day registrations for the future.
In the certified results, you mean?
Well, so there was the precinct level, the precinct turnout, for example. Mm-hmm. It shows vote by mail, and it shows election day. Mm-hmm. Election day includes that which are ballots cast and counted at the precinct, as well as any ballots that were then counted subsequently that were provisional or same-day registrants.
No. With the current system, it's bifurcated. The results are bifurcated by vote by mail and precinct. So we can't add additional categories. And also potentially, depending on the numbers, it's like with the votes with the touchscreen, with the conditional voter registration votes, if you break it down by precinct, potentially you could discern how an individual voted, because you wouldn't have enough of a...
I figured that was also, yes, a concern. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, so it can't be done now, but then even going forward, we'd have to look, and this is the first time we've done it, so I don't have any data points really to assess. But potentially going forward, that's something we'd have to consider.
Yeah, I think at least if there was some way to account for a total that were the precinct cast ballots versus the others. So we reconciled the total to what was cast in the some way. I don't know. Perhaps it'd be something worth examining, because the thing is, if I actually go and look at the paperwork from the precinct and then I see the delta, I guess they could go back. Anybody wanted to audit it could go back and they could look at the specifics of what had been processed, right?
I thought I put that in the letter. I can put that in the letter. That's, I mean, if people are interested, so many conditional voter registration ballots were cast.
Yeah, I just think going forward, it would be some useful information just to fully disclose any differences that were between the precinct paperwork and the voting totals. That would be my suggestion. But I don't think, again, and that's any reason not to find the election free and fair. So with that, I will open the floor to other commissioners.
I have one follow-up item. President Donaldson, you referred to a discrepancy report, or that's how Director Arndt's identified it in our BOPEC meeting, and I expected to see that in our commission packet this time. I am not sure that I saw it, but maybe it's in some form that I don't recognize as a discrepancy report. Has that been provided?
No, I've got to send that yet. The person who oversees that report has been on leave, so I think on Monday I can send that. I can get that to the commission.
Right. Again, we didn't feel it was significant enough, I think, to change our findings. Okay. But we would like that as an action item for a future meeting.
So I have some things I want to mention, but I first have a question. Director Ernst, so the difference between the what do you call it, the counting card? Is that what it's called?
Card one, yeah. I mean, it's
Card
just,
one, yeah, and the voter turnout. We've talked about that in the past, and what would it take to make the official turnout numbers be actually the number of people that turned out? Because I think it presents the public with a lower number than what it really was.
Yeah, I think the difference is 433, so it's not real high.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's only one election in the past has the first contest in card one that I'm aware of not been the highest vote getting contest. That was I think it was actually a measure in 2016, if I remember correctly. So the system is programmed to use the first contest on the first card because multi-card ballots really weren't in vogue when the system was developed as they are now. And even now, San Francisco is unique in having multi-card ballots every election and going up to 4 and 5 cards. So in 2016, even though the system was generating a turnout of X, I indicated in my certification letter that turnout was Y, based on the vote totals for that measure versus the reported number for that. I think it was president, actually, for 2016. So there's one measure, if I remember correctly, had more votes than did the contest for president. And then in my certification letter, I indicated that is why so I restated the turnout percentage in the letter, even though the summary results had a different number. So I try to make note of that.
Okay, thanks. And then I want to highlight a few things. I also presented a memo as part of the packet that includes a number of things that I noticed. And I'm not going to go through everything, but there were 3 or 4 things I wanted to highlight. And I'll just mention those now. So one thing that's not on here that I really liked was an improvement over the past was the change that you made to the election summary page with the ranked choice voting. You provided a link to the more detailed reports. So that was good. And you indicated that they were just the first choice totals.
We did that in 2016 as well.
Well, the actual link next to the contest.
Oh, on the website. Yeah, right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I thought that was very helpful, especially with this election, because of the amount of interest in the mayor's race. But I do think that in the future, I'm not sure how the new system will shake out, but if it could be more integrated into the main summary, if the final winner could be somehow integrated with that results summary, that would be helpful. And then, so on to the memo, the few things I wanted to highlight. The first thing is, I think, something of interest to the commission. At the last commission meeting, one of the public commenters said that most of the public doesn't even know that we exist. And then something I had observed earlier, but I decided to mention it here, is that I looked back at some old voter information pamphlets, and I saw that back from 2002 to 2004, on the same page where the voter information pamphlet mentions the ballot simplification committee, there's also like a third of a page about the commission, and basically telling the public that the commission exists and it's there to oversee the elections in the department. But then that stopped being included starting with the November 2004 election. And it's just kind of an idea that came to mind after the public comment that if the public could know about the commission, it would give them a way of, someone that could provide, a way for them to provide feedback on the election if they knew about us. So then the next thing, and I also included the actual pages from those old VIPs on the last pages, so you could see what it looked like. And then, so then the next thing on the memo I wanted to highlight was, again, one of the things that was talked about a lot in the media after the election was the amount of time to determine the winner of the mayor's race. And I think after a couple weeks, I think the media's finally started to get that it's not because of how long it takes to tabulate RCV ballots, but how close the race was. And I know, Director Ernst, there are some quotes in the media where you were telling the media that it could take 5 days to know the results. And I was thinking it could be more helpful, rather than giving like a number, just letting them know that it kind of depends on how close it is, because...
I do. Yeah, I mean, I do. It's just...
Oh, you do?
Yeah, just because even if I'm quoted, doesn't mean that's what I said in a newspaper article. No, I do. I emphasize that it's not because of ranked choice voting. It's because it's like any contest or any measure that's tight. You have to count every ballot, and it just takes time to count every ballot. So, no, I said that 100 times or more.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I actually saw some later videos where you were saying that on camera.
Yeah.
But for some reason, yeah, they sometimes provide that wrong information. So, yeah, we've all been there, I think, with the media. And then the other thing is I included some information about something I included a few years ago, and that's around the ballot instructions for ranked choice voting. With each RCV election, there are voters that they might just rank one candidate or put the same candidate 3 times. And I do think there's something that can be done to help improve the instructions so voters know that it's not helping them to do that. And Director Ernst, I don't know, I know there's a couple resources that are out there to help with the design of instructions on RCV ballots. I know there's something called the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. And I know there's another, there's a group that specializes in ballot design. I think you might know about them. But have you ever thought about reaching out to them for how to present this instructions or in the ballot?
The ballot, yeah, with the Center for Civic Design is who you're thinking.
Yeah.
We work with them a lot, actually, on both the ballot and the voter guide. The Ranked Choice Voting Center, no, we've not been in contact with them for ranked choice voting instructions, but we can certainly take a look at it.
Okay, and I think the Center for Civic Design may actually have done a recent study on how to improve RCV specifically, so maybe it was after you had last talked with them. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was actually, that may have been it. So,
one point on your memo was us including a letter to voters who received a second ballot.
yes,
We do already send the letter. So
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if Stephen Hill didn't see it or what happened, but Every time we issue a second ballot because someone's address changed, we do include notice in the second ballot.
Okay, well, great. Okay, yeah, and then you could take a look at this stuff and if there's anything useful. So, okay, thank you.
Commissioners? I do want to point out that there is also a document here by, provided by a member of the public, David Carey, that did some observation at City Hall and provided some feedback, and we discussed that at the BOPEC meeting, some of the lines and things, and whereas the director did his best to anticipate volume, there was a spike in volume in the afternoon and did his best to compensate, but it was one of those things like sometimes forecasts are wrong. Anything to add, Commissioner Jung?
Yeah, and just to add, not just that forecasts are wrong, but none of the data leading up to the the election day where there was a real bump after lunch, the afternoon of election day, none of the data indicated that there would be such a bump.
I think the last thing I wanted to point out was that one of our policies that we enacted through a motion was that we should promote the use of the accessible equipment. There was a script added for the roster clerk that says you will receive a paper ballot unless you request an audio or touchscreen format with accessible features. So that was something that was part of the instructions for the roster clerk. So I just did want to point that out, and that is consistent with the policy. I did. I think, that, however, there was could have been emphasized more that was the actual script in the training, because I had to ask about this, and they pointed it out that it was on the page. It's possible I had missed it, but just to mention that. If there are no other questions or comments, do I have a motion to I find that the election was free and fair?
Well, I think the bylaws say that we're to make a more specific finding that the election plan succeeded in carrying out a free, fair, and functional election. So I would make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any comments by members of the public?
Brent Turner with the California Association of Voting Officials, just going on record to state that we have analyzed this particular election. We agree with the Commission's finding to the extent that these particular systems allow for oversight of an election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I think just one last comment is, as always, I am amazed at the ability of the election department to scale to accommodate these elections. So it's always quite a feat, something to observe. So beyond that, can we take? Yes.
It just triggers on me that we also should really comment, even though there's not a whole lot of public here, but the members of the community come out for a very, very long day, and almost all of whom do an amazing job under, pretty stressful conditions sometimes. And I think we should all acknowledge that we're fortunate to have that kind of a residency base
And
that's willing to
community
help out with the elections. It's very impressive that they mobilize like that a couple of times a year at most, and it always works out.
Yes. Thank you for that comment. I agree.
Actually, I have a question related to that. Director Ernst, I know, maybe even up to the day of the election, I was hearing that you were short of poll workers. And how did you manage to wrangle up enough people, or were there some precincts that were short?
No, we had sufficient staffing at each polling place. We didn't have a surplus of poll workers at the polling places. So we had 3 assigned at each site. I normally like to have 4 and up to 5, but we just didn't have the numbers, and also we didn't have the standby poll worker pool to send folks out to the precincts to supplement polling places. So it was tight.
Yeah.
That's the election, huh?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any further comments? Secretary Chan, would you take the vote, please?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Giordanic?
Yes.
Giordanic, yes. Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Jung, yes. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Rowe, yes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Next item.
Item 4, open source voting. Discussion and possible action regarding the City and County of San Francisco's open source voting system project. 2 parts. Technical Advisory Committee update, Director's report.
Great. Commissioner Giordanic, do you want to give a TAC update?
Sure. So we don't have a TAC member aside from myself here today. I think there's a couple people that are out of town, and one of the members has a long drive to get here. But at the last meeting, the biggest thing we did was discuss the civil grand jury report, and we actually went through each recommendation and finding, even the ones that the commission didn't have to respond to, and we had a short discussion about each one, and which was really helpful to me in terms of working with President Donaldson to draft up some responses for us. So that was good. And I should also say that the sentiment among the members was that the civil grand jury report was especially compared to the Slalom report, they were generally very happy with the document. They thought it was generally accurate and fair, and they thought it did a generally very good job. We also, just kind of on the administrative side, we, at the meeting before that, we had voted to try to start doing videos of our meetings instead of audio, just because we can, so we're trying it out. And thank you, Secretary Chan, for arranging for the video camera, and Director Arntz for lending the camera. So we haven't gotten it posted yet. We're still trying to get a hold of some materials for that. But so that's something we're doing. And yeah, we're just continuing, working on our results reporter component, and also kind of expanded that project a little bit to work on some software to help convert the department's election data so we can use the results reporter. So that's about it.
Very good. And yes, thanks to the TAC for taking up the civil grand jury report. And as you mentioned, we worked together with the input from BOPEC as well to come up with that, and we will discuss that under another agenda item. I think the one other update would be that I'd like to add before the director's report is that we met with the CIO, Linda Jewell, for the city. Honestly, I didn't get all the way through your director's report. Perhaps it's in there, Director Arntz. But we met with her last Thursday. She was very well informed already and on the project, and I would say interested in it, if not enthusiastic, which might even be a way to describe it. So she certainly was interested in talking about the specifics of how we might proceed. And various aspects of what we might deliver at any given time, the aspects of what might, the order of things, partnerships with other jurisdictions, as well as being clear about what the risks were, what were acceptable risks, et cetera. So I thought it was a very good discussion. Director Arntz also participated along with Commissioner Giordanic, and I think it was a very positive meeting, and that there was certainly a willingness to continue to collaborate and be open about that. Also, a discussion about the position for the project manager, that they're actually in the process of looking for somebody to fit a rather broad spectrum of need, which has to do with someone who's done software development, open source, as well as has elections background. That's the ideal candidate, and as she called it, a unicorn, looking for a unicorn. So all of that, however, and the recognition of needing that set of knowledge, whether it be in one person or having to figure out some way to either have more than one person or hire one person, then buy the expertise with a contractor or something. She's already thinking through those things. So, Commissioner Giordanic, do you have anything to add? Maybe?
No, just that I was very happy that we had the meeting, and I thought it was very good to get, her in the room along with the director, and then you. And I'm just very hopeful that we have that sort of communication going forward, because I think it'll be key to the success of the project.
And President Donaldson, was there a thought that she had about possibly implementing a validation project as a means of starting an open source voting project?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Jung. Yes, the thought was that perhaps the first component could be something that would be a validation module that would allow you to recheck the results, essentially. So it would be outside the voting system itself, but would prove the actual process of developing a system using open source, et cetera, and then without having to go through a full certification. Director Giroux felt that there was an appetite for that also in other jurisdictions, so then we would see the actual uptake of an open source, of the open source output, which would be actually prove all the elements of an open source project that might be more broadly, develop a system.
And in effect, a validator module would be a tabulator. Is that right?
It would do something like or it would do the tabulation, yes. It would be a way to recheck that. That was the point, yes.
I think also just the fact that we're only dealing with around $650,000, it really limits as to what we could work on. So I think I kind of agree that something like that would be doable. But something that's using extensive hardware, I think might exceed the funds that we have.
Okay.
And then Commissioner Donaldson, so we had discussed some amendments to the resolution that we passed it last month. Should we talk
you
about
want
that
to take it up
or-
now and then? Sure.
Yeah, so when I met with President Donaldson to discuss the responses to the grand jury report, we something else that we discussed and then I included in the packet here, this is only 2 sides of 1 page. It's a proposed amendment to our resolution that we passed last month. And this is partly a result of what we learned at the last meeting, but also after the civil grand jury report came out, it was clear that this issue of project ownership is one that I think would really be helpful if we can more clearly answer that question. And in the resolution as we passed it, what we had said was that the commission shall ask the mayor and the board to name the department as the owner. But in speaking with different people and also in speaking with President Donaldson, there doesn't seem to be any reason to me why we can't just declare it as a policy that the department is the project owner. And that way it's clear, to us and the department who the owner is. And if anyone else in the city has a problem with it, they could just, they could step forward. But as it is now, no one's really taking the initiative to just state that.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the clarification, but I do want to step back one moment. And it does this group here, President Donaldson, Commissioner Jordanek, and Director Arntz had a meeting with Director Gerald about, kind of their vision, paraphrasing, your report from that meeting. Director Gerald seemed competent, interested, excited, and engaging in that project, and already, had thoughts about the project manager role. That combined with our interaction with the director at the BOPEC meeting, where the director's view is that this software development is outside the mandate of the Department of Elections. Does that give you those 2 data points combined, does that give you any second thoughts about whether the home for this project should be a department, whose director views software development as outside its mandate?
Could I answer that? Yeah, so I think actually I'm actually going to answer with your answer, which is that that well, President Donaldson, the way he says it is that we are the sort of the customer, and the Department of Technology is helping the department implement their project and their vision. So it's that by being the owner, it's the Director of Elections that makes the decisions, but then the Department of Technology assists in carrying that out. So, the work will still be done by the Department of Technology, but it's just that decision-making process flows from the department. Because the thing is, if otherwise, it's never really going to be clear, like who. We want to have a clear accountability for the project. And true that the Department of Technology may have opinions on certain things, but then it's kind of a negotiation between the Director of Elections and the Director of Technology. But I think from our perspective, we want to make clear that this is a project for elections. And
As the customer, not the developer. I mean, I would imagine that's the director's position.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just putting words in your mouth. Let me know if I'm wrong, Director.
If I can comment on that. Yeah, I mean, the way I thought about this, and actually even before the grand jury report, is that, yes, who actually, quote unquote, owns the project and how does that look? And to me, the owner needs to be the customer. And that somebody like the Department of Technology becomes a provider to a customer. Customer being, in this case, as is recommended here, that it's the Department of Elections and the Election Commission is the suggested wording here. And as Commissioner Jurdonic says, someone else can step forward and say, I will be the owner, but right now we don't have anybody who's stated to be the owner, and that is the suggestion here, is that we just, so that there is an owner, that we declare that here.
Look, I'm just raising the issue because it seemed logical to me based on those two pieces of data. And I certainly understand why, this commission, members of whom have served, for lack of a better term, as advocates for open source voting, would want to own the project because that would make the project accountable to this commission. So I understand why one might want to do that, but doesn't seem to me the only logical choice. Particularly if you view Director Gerald and her department as kind of also competent in owning this project, where you have another director in another department who probably rightly feels like they aren't competent to own the project.
well, it's not a question of competence. I mean, I think that Linda is very competent. It's just that her involvement is in assisting the department in implementing its project. And I think we're already on the record as saying we want the Department of Elections to be the owner. I mean, that's what our resolution says we're asking the mayor and board to do. But, I mean, since we passed that, I realized we don't need to ask the mayor and board for permission. Like in the city, they're waiting for.
No, I understand what you're trying to clarify, and I was also here during the last commission meeting, so I remember what we passed. I'm just asking a more fundamental question in light of those two data points that we've had since the last meeting.
Well, the thing is, I want to. I mean, in light of those data points, I mean, my position is the same, I guess.
And I think that owning the requirements and the one that's going to end up with the whatever is developed and have to use it, the Department of Elections, with the oversight of the Elections Commission, makes more sense than saying the Department of Technology, which should be the builder. That they should own the delivery, but not the ultimate deliverable. That's the suggestion.
I'm just trying to think through the pros and the cons, and it seems to me that the idea of ownership is so that there's somebody who's really taking pride in this and not going to duck responsibility. And that brings me to the question of whether the Department of Technology has any interest in being the owner, or whether it would in any way impact their impetus, and because we're going to be, if we're the owner, we're still relying upon them to do most of that work. And so I don't know if you discussed that with the director of the Department of Technology, but I certainly wouldn't want to give them an out or a disincentive. I'm not leaning one way or the other, but as I try to think of, are there any cons? That's the only potential con I could think, is that if somebody thinks that their toes are either being stepped on or not stepped on, but they say, hey, I've got other priorities, I'm not the owner of this one. I don't know that this changes that result, but you guys met with her, and it's the only thing I can think of that causes me any concern, because it's great to have an owner, but we need somebody who's accountable for getting this done, and we're really relying upon another governmental department with their own budget and their own staff and their own, million other priorities. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on whether this affects that or not.
I guess just going back to what I said, I think that a customer-supplier relationship is sort of a thought behind this. I think that there's and that there actually is a position being funded and hired for to do this work in the Department of Technology, means that there is a commitment of funds to a deliverable or an effort around this, and then how that would be executed. So I think that, again, as Commissioner Judronic mentioned, if this somehow became an impediment to that, I think that we could reconsider this, but that means that in that claim of ownership, we'd also want to continue to assure the transparency. By doing it this way, part of it is not just declaring that there is an owner, it's also a matter of assuring that we still have visibility into the project. At least that's part of the intention, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely pluses and minuses to having the department own it. The potential minuses, by identified, a potential plus is that there couldn't be a tighter integration between, the object and goal and the development if you have it within one department. That's clearly, removing that one barrier makes a lot of sense. And the fact that there are people on this commission who are advocates for, the development, that also makes sense. And, on the other hand, we don't even have a project manager yet. And, that project manager seems like it's going to land in a department other than ours. And we have exactly 0 people in our department who are competent to build such a project. And so when you talk about the development of an open source voting project, as is, that's the phrasing used in the civil grand jury report, it's, I guess it's what you all are contemplating is a different conception of owner than, maybe what some people might contemplate. But look, I don't object to this clarification. It's just a thought.
Further comment? Questions?
No, I was just going to make a motion to pass the resolution as amended.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further comment on the commission at the moment? Comment by members of the public?
Brent Turner with Gavo approving of this resolution amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
David Carey here. I'd like to point out a little bit of a historical precedent on some of this issue, and that is when the department first acquired some significant new custom functionality for its voting system back in, I think it was 2003 or so, for ranked choice voting. And that was a case where there wasn't any question that getting that custom voting system functionality was the responsibility of the Department of Elections. And they went out and did some contracting to get that done with the current vendor, but whatever, And I'd kind of encourage you, I know we'll talk about the civil grand jury report later, but think about this as an acquisition and of an open source voting system, and it just so happens to be that you're not buying kind of off-the-shelf software this time. It has to be developed, custom developed, and who you engage with to do that, whether it's the Department of Technology or an outside vendor or some combination, is kind of a separate issue from who's owning the responsibility for accomplishing that acquisition. So with that in mind, I'd encourage you to pass the adjustment to your resolution.
Very good. I do want to. I'm remembering something that that Director Jewell mentioned, and she talked about also about the Department of Elections being the business. So she's the developer, but the business is the actual owner of requirements, and then the ultimate deliverable. I'd like to ask Director Lawrence any thoughts that he has on this, because this is naming the Department of Elections as owning as the owner.
Yeah, a couple questions. One statement. How would this work? Because the Director Jarrell has already indicated that she's moving forward with hiring a project manager, and specifically for the technical aspects of developing a voting system, which the Department of Elections cannot do. So if the Department of Elections becomes the owner of developing a voting system, do we then tell Director Jarrell to stop? Then how do I control Director Jarrell's time, because she's doing this based on her thinking that she's the owner of the technical aspects of developing a voting system, and that the Department of Elections would provide support in relation to how a system would operate, which is all that we know. I mean, do we tell her to wait until we provide her specifications? And then two, I said this before, the department's not requesting the city to build a voting system. The Elections Commission is. So the idea that the Department of Elections is the customer is incorrect, because we're not seeking a voting system. We're not looking to develop a voting system. We're looking to get a newer technology we can use for the benefit of the voters. So I understand this idea of setting policy, but we're not the customer. We don't have something in mind for a voting system. And really, every time I come to these meetings, I learn something new about a voting system that the department supposedly is the customer for. So with that said, is there a way for the commission to be the customer? Or why is really, the department is merely just a tool for the commission to reach its ends when it comes to developing an open source voting system. The department is in no way seeking to develop a voting system, because it's not within its mandate. First of all, it's not within its wheelhouse. So is there a way for the commission, since the commission has this high interest in the city acquiring and developing a voting system, for the commission to be the owner of this?
Well, I'm actually very surprised to hear you say that, because I was surprised to hear you say something like that during the meeting with her, because this is what we've been working on for years. And
my position has not changed. Every time I've met with you, I've said the same thing.
Well, no.
So the difference now is that I know it's coming, and the ranked choice voting was why I'm reacting this way. The ranked choice voting department, we did not control that process at all, and we were at the whims of the contractor for 2 years. And for 2 years, the department caught a lot of criticism, and it was constant, because the department did not have a ranked choice voting system ready to go yet, because one didn't exist. It's the same thing here. Now all of a sudden, and now what I'm seeing in the notes from the TAC meeting, every idea that the grand jury put forward, it's like the department's going to start doing this. And the thing is, at some point, people have to realize our role is to conduct elections. And at some point, developing a voting system that can directly interfere our ability to run elections in this town. And it happened with ranked choice voting, which was much smaller. To put the development of a voting system on this department is just wrong. It's a bad policy. And if the commission wants to develop a voting system, that's fine. But I think the commission needs to find a way for it to be more involved in the city developing voting system than just trying to push on the department, because the department's going to fail trying to develop a voting system.
Can I finish my comment?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that back in 2015, we passed a departmental policy, and I'll just read the policy. It says, finally resolved that it be the policy of the Department of Elections to support and work towards the adoption of a fully open voting system, including supporting the development, testing, and certification of such a system. And I mean, to hear...
I've done that.
No, but to hear your remarks today that you're not seeking an open source voting system, that's exactly not supporting what we established in our
No,
policy.
the department is not looking to develop a voting system. The commission is. And the department has supported the commission in its policies to develop a voting system. I've issued RFIs. I put it in the RFP. I've had many meetings. So yes, I fulfilled the commission's policy. The department's fulfilled the commission's policy to develop a voting system. But now to put everything on the department, and really it's just a transfer of what the commissioners want. It's not what the department's seeking. If this was something about outreach, that would be different probably. But this is something that's like the end point for most voters when it comes to interacting with the elections process is the voting system. And we don't have the expertise, we don't have the ability. And also, the voters aren't coming to us and telling us we want an open source voting system. They tell us they didn't get their ballot. They tell us they didn't get their voter guide. They tell us that the tool that tracks their vote by mail ballot on our website is broken. That's what they want to know when the results are coming out. They're not. No one. They want like ranked choice voting. How does this work? We'll hear about that. No one came to me this election and said, "Well, we want to get an open source voting system developed, and we want the department to do it." That's not something that's coming from the public. It's coming from the commission, and the department doesn't have a basis really to go out and develop a system other than this policy from the commission. And it's fun. Look, I'm not against an open source voting system, but my concern and what I saw with the ranked choice voting is that trying to put this onto the department is wrong, and it's bad policy. And the department will not be able to achieve this. Now, the commission, to me, like I think Commissioner Jung was correct, basically we want the department to develop a voting, to be the owner, so the commission can control the department in the development of a system. But I don't think this is a good idea to put this on the department because we don't have the ability. And I think also when the director of technology shows the enthusiasm to step forward and get this thing up and running and get a project manager hired, which is something this commission has been really complaining about for over a year, and it's happening now. Finally, we got the funding for it, and now it's shifting again. And I don't, and the plan keeps shifting, even when there's positive steps that the plan shifts. And for the department then to become the owner, and all of a sudden the plan's going to start shifting again, and it's going to be like the ranked choice voting, where all of a sudden it's just negativity coming into the department, and a lot of energy is expended trying to develop this voting system, and it detracts from our core mission, and that's administrating and conducting elections in this town. And that's my primary concern, and I have put that forward many times.
Well, San Francisco's charter says it's our job is to set departmental policy. And our policy is that for the department to support this project. And when you're telling other city leaders that this is not something the department's interested in, that really undercuts the whole policy. And
I'm not against I told you, I'm not against open source, but the department's not the place to do it.
Well, and that's my second point. We are not asking you to develop the system. We're not. We're saying to support, you can be the project owner, and the Department of Technology can do the work of developing and hiring things.
But they're not the owner. Why would they do it?
Because they're part of the city government.
Well, I'm not going to call up Linda Durrell and say, hey, man.
Well, she's already offered to help.
But even from that meeting we had last week, the sands have shifted on her. She said in that meeting that she'll own the technology aspects of developing a voting system. She said it. And she said the Department of Elections can own the business side, whatever that means. But she's taking ownership of developing a voting system. I don't get it. Why not follow up? Why not let that happen?
I don't see her role changing at all with this policy. You can still, the point is that the work that she's doing is in service to the project that you're going to be using.
She has no reason to do anything. I mean, look, she has stepped forward as a representative of the person that leads the Department of Technology to say that she will develop the technical aspects of a voting system.
That's great.
And she said that she never fails. She told you that many times. And here it's shifting already on her. And there's no specs to give to her. And the specs, I can't develop specs. The department can't develop specs.
So I'd like to, just a few comments. One is, what I've heard from her is that, again, she referred to the Department of Elections as the business. To me, the business is the owner. Just as though you were going out for a contracting exercise in terms of buying a system, you are the customer. So it's the Department of Elections that would develop the requirements, but not actually do the building. That she and her department would be the ones developing and providing the project management, the expertise to actually develop such a system, as any supplier would be. And so this was meant to be a clarification, and at least that's how I would define owner in this case. So certainly the department is a customer of the existing contractors, and certainly in those cases you chose to be a customer in that contracting exercise and in that context. We're asking for this to be in a different context. And I think beyond that, in terms of members of the public, sure, the average voter isn't out there coming to the poll and saying, hey, am I voting on an open source system? But that doesn't mean the public's not asking for this. It doesn't mean that this has gone beyond the Election Commission, because the Board of Supervisors has also voted on this as well. And we've gotten the comments from the mayor also in support of this. So I think that the fact that not every voter is informed on open source voting. I think if you ask them if they wanted a secure, transparent system that assured them the integrity of the election, they would say absolutely. And the reason we have this policy is we feel that an open source system provides a better system in support of that.
President Donaldson, I don't disagree with the purposes of what you and Commissioner Jurnanik are saying, but as a commission, we have to show we set policy, true, that's what it says in the charter, but we have to show some deference to the actual experience of department heads who actually have to get things done. And if our director is saying that, saying in a resolution that that we're the owner of a project, and as I understand project, it's development of the project, would take the kind of the eagerness and the feeling of ownership out of a department that actually wants to lead it. I wonder if we need to give that some more deference than we're giving.
But the director just told us that he's telling people the department is not seeking an open source system. So, I mean, how is that helping us? Do we have to pass a policy saying that it shall be the policy of the department to want an open source system? I mean, right now it's at odds with what we're even interested in. I mean, the department that we oversee is telling the city that they don't want this.
That I don't think, if that's what he said, that's not what he meant, but he can clarify.
Not what I'm saying. Look at the amount of time I put into supporting your policies on developing open source voting systems. And it has not been convenient for me to do so. But at the same time, I have a station that I must fulfill. And if someone asks me, does the department need to develop a voting system? Well, the answer is no. I'm fulfilling a policy of the commission. So, which I have done. I have never not tried to fulfill the policy in every step that I've taken in relation to voting systems. But I'm not going to go dumb and not have an opinion on something just because someone passed a policy. So, like I've supported the policy, but at the same time, I have opinions. And if the department's not seeking the voting system to develop a voting system, I'll say so. But at the same time, I fulfilled the policies. I've gone to COIT. I've got funding. I've informed the commission. I've had multiple meetings. I've developed RFIs. I've responded to emails. I put information in the RFP. I've tried to think of ways to bring open source into an existing proprietary voting system. That's where this idea of having this widget, that it came from me in relation to the current voting system. It's not something new. It's not from TAC. So I'm supporting the policy.
Well, all those things are great, but why would you say in a meeting that the department doesn't want an open source system?
I never said that. I never said it. What I said is the department's not seeking to develop a voting system. I've said, like, I don't care if a system's open source. I don't care if it's not open source. I want it to work. I want it to be audible. I want people to trust it. But I'm not, the department doesn't have the capacity to do this. And what happens, and what really burns me up, I'll tell you, is that it doesn't seem to matter to the commission that the department's core mission would be interfered with by developing a voting system. And it happened with ranked choice voting. It has no impact whatsoever in the conversation. And it's been like this for years. And at some point, there's going to come a tipping point where the department's focused on developing a voting system to meet this policy more so than meeting the needs of the voters, which are the true customers of a voting system.
I have a couple of questions for Director Arntz. And the first one relates to that. So you said at the beginning of your comments that developing the ranked choice voting system really interfered with your ability to run the elections. And I don't really know what you mean by that, and I would love to have some more information about that. Like, what does that mean to interfere with your ability? And I mean, give us some context to understand that. The second question I have is, you as a department head do have a unique insight into, what motivates department heads. You were in the same meeting that our commissioners were in with the head of the Department of Technology, and I think you're sensing that this policy we're suggesting would interfere with the Department of Technology's motivation, and that's important to me. So I want to hear about both of those aspects, both what you think and what you know about the Department of Technology and the impact this might have on them, and also more elucidation on how, I'm not familiar with the ranked choice voting interference that you're talking about, so if you could explain that.
So when the charter amendment was passed in March of 2002 that implemented or required the implementation of ranked choice voting in San Francisco, the timeline was first to be implemented for the November 2002 election, which was impossible. There's no way the department was going to be able to get a ranked choice voting component installed in any voting system, even including the existing voting system, in a matter of 5 months. But the pressure that was placed on the department was placed on me. It was daily. It was constant phone calls, constant emails, people coming in. The commission had meetings like every week to compel the department to develop a ranked choice voting component, which we couldn't do it. And we were reliant on the vendor, ESS at the time, to do so. So the first deadline was missed, and the charter amendment requires that if ranked choice voting was not developed, implemented by November 2002, that it would be developed, implemented for the November 2003 election. Again, the department has no ability to develop applications for voting systems, especially one, doesn't have the knowledge, and two, in that case, it was a proprietary system, so it wasn't open source. We couldn't just go into the system, pry it open, and inject software and firmware, even if we had the ability. So that the second deadline was missed, the November 2003, and then fair vote. Commissioner Jordanek was a member, probably still is, brought a lawsuit against the department before the November 2003 election I think in August, prior to the November elections, compel us to implement a ranked choice voting system. If we couldn't, to hand count a citywide election for mayor. And it's just, and that it was just kept going on and on. And really, almost all of my time was taken up with trying to get this ranked choice voting thing going. I wasn't involved on how we were processing registration cards. I wasn't involved in how we were doing outreach. I wasn't involved if we were entering data into the registration database correctly. I wasn't involved if we were getting the warehouse set up to an election. I wasn't involved in how the polling place operations were going because I was so focused on ranked choice voting. And I see this is far bigger than ranked choice voting. I see it requiring far more attention than ranked choice voting. And this is going to take years. And And just like with ranked choice voting, so that the charter amendment had a set, discrete time frame by which the department had to implement ranked choice voting, which it could not meet because they didn't have the ability. So to develop a voting system tends to take several years. But people here want to have something in place by 2020, which is impossible. And the department can't do it. And even if there were contractors that are ready to go right now, it'd be a huge challenge for them to get it up, get everything designed, developed, get an application to the state, and get it approved, and get the thing implemented. So all that pressure, all that attention is going to be, for me, for sure, will be on a voting system. This commission, every meeting, there's more. It wants more. It wants more, which the department can't deliver. And calling us the owner of a voting system doesn't change that dynamic. It might give the commission entree, it thinks, to compelling the department to develop a voting system. It might give the commission the sense that it can control or affect other departments in developing a voting system, but it's not true. It's the department gets caught with the policy, and the department gets caught with having to work through all the issues related to do the work. And this is huge. It's a huge project. Now, in relation to Commissioner Jarrell, she's abiding by the policies that have set by the board, by COIT. She's a member of COIT. COIT has put forward that developing an open source voting system is a long-term project of the city, and Director Jarrell has picked that up. She realizes the Department of Elections does not have the ability to decide even the beginnings, the basics of what to create for a voting system, and the security aspect, which is something she brought up several times during the meeting. So she's taken upon herself to fulfill the city's policy to develop an open source voting system on the technological side. And she said she will own it. She said several times in the meeting that she'll own that side of the project. And now here the commission's going to pass a policy, the Department of Elections, which can't do the work, is the owner, but we're the customer. And so am I supposed to get a contract with the Department of Technology? And okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the agreement. Do I need an MOU? When instead the director has already volunteered on her own, but part of her job, part of her responsibility for being a professional, to develop the technical aspects. So now we're going to take that away. And I have to go get an MOU with her because she can't do it on her own because she's not the owner anymore. Doesn't make any sense.
That's not what we're asking.
Well, what are you asking?
We're asking that, the relationship would still be the same. She's already volunteered to help do the development work for the department. But the point is that when it comes to who's the decision-making authority for something, there needs to be a single person. And then, like I said earlier today, it's going to be a negotiation between you and her. And of course she doesn't answer you. But the thing is, but the thing is that during these conversations, you could tell her, these are things that we'd like to see in the project, and then she could tell you yes or no.
So let me say something, if you don't mind, because what I hear, I hear a little bit two different languages going on here, and I think what I understand you to be saying, which I think we have to take very seriously as commission, is you and your department. Two things I think you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you're saying, one, repeating many times, you don't have this expertise, you don't have the capacity to develop this, and I think the reason that's so important to you is because these types of resolutions create the impression in the public mind that you do have that, and you want to make sure that you've been telling everybody from day one, we don't have this ability. And I'm guessing you're not a technological expert, and I'm guessing that your IT people who are very talented aren't open source experts, and you're very concerned that we're creating the impression that you can do something that you can't do, even though you've been saying many times that this isn't your expertise. Am I getting that part right? Okay.
Totally.
The second thing I think I hear you saying, which is a little similar to some of the things I've said in the past, which is, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you said you don't want open source. I think you said this is completely me paraphrasing, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're trying to say is that you, as a director of elections and as the Department of Elections, want to remain neutral in terms of pretty much everything except for making sure that people know when to vote, where to vote, how to vote, and that their votes are properly counted, and sort of basically apolitical, but really keeping to your core mission of the mechanics of voting, is similar to kind of a discussion we had at the last meeting. And again, is what you're saying that you're concerned not about the idea of supporting open source, but the idea of advocating, being an advocate for something? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not so much. The department really must be neutral in all things, and I've learned that the hard way through the years I've done this. The issue is, open source is fine, and certainly people have very strong support for open source for very good reasons and through life experience, which we don't share that in the department. For us, we need a system that meets the needs of the voter at the point of contact. The point of contact is marking the ballot, and the card gets tallied correctly, and then the results are reported, and that the integrity of the votes being counted and the results being reported is there. The trust is there with the system. That's the main thing. If open source increases that trust, that's fine. I'm not against that, and I've supported it very much in the past several years. The concern is if we are given this ownership, if we are formally the leader of this, we're going to, we don't know what we're leading, and it's coming from the commission. It's coming from not even the full commission. It's coming from a sector of the commission. And to say that I would be the owner as a director of elections, really, you guys would be telling me from meeting to meeting what you think I should be deciding. And it's not a matter of me having conversations with the director of technology and say, well, in my view, this is how we're going to build a voting system. It's not going to be that way, Well,
I have to say that I can empathize with that as one of the people on we have a couple members of this commission who obviously are very informed on this and have really solid, good ideas, and probably could have that, and have been having that discussion with the director of the Department of Technology. If somebody asked me to be the owner, you could declare me the owner, and I would be absolutely useless. And I too would be terrified of the idea because I wouldn't know how to have that discussion. I couldn't have that discussion. I'm not qualified. And I think what I hear you saying is that you're not qualified either. And I'm guessing you kind of started this off with a compromise resolution, which is that the commission be the owners. But I'm guessing that wouldn't be your preference either, that you would rather have the Department of Technology be the owner because they're the ones who can implement it. They're the ones who understand it. They need some help understanding the open source aspect of it. And it appears, at least there's two different views, I think, of what happened in that meeting with the director of the Department of Technology, but it appears that you at least heard her taking ownership and wanting to take ownership. And I agree that we shouldn't be interfering. We shouldn't, be interfering with the Department of Technology's drive to get this done. And B, we shouldn't be putting the director in a position where he's expected to provide directive if he doesn't have the qualifications to provide that directive. I mean, the TAC can be involved in that. You can be involved in that. But I know we're going to get some public comment on this, which I definitely want to hear. But I don't think we should be taking these comments lightly.
Well, we've been asking since 2015 for the department to have a resource to provide him the expertise he needs, and we're finally getting that now. But I don't think anyone on the commission ever was assuming that Director Ernst had the expertise to do something like this.
What I hear is the director saying, by making me the owner, by making the department the owner, which is effectively the director, that you're putting him into a position of directing things that he doesn't feel qualified to direct. And I am guessing that you think that would actually interfere with the project getting done. Not just that you're afraid of being, above your pay grade on that particular issue, but that you don't want to interfere because you're going to be having conversations and having to go to Commissioner Jordanek and say, what do you think? And again, we all have the same goal here. Well, I'm going to have to let you speak for what your goal is, but I know the commissioners and I know the members of our public who frequently come have the same goal, which is to get this thing done and get it done as quickly as we possibly can. And what I'm hearing from the director is that you may think making us the owner, or you the owner in particular, interferes with getting it done properly and quickly, and also interferes with your many other tasks, which are running the elections.
Correct.
I think we need to take that pretty seriously.
Right.
And I know we have members of the public dying to speak. This is an important topic.
Well, first of all, Commissioner, I really actually appreciate all that you've said, because it's now starting to make a connection to me, because I was getting a little confused with, there were two very different stories and languages that were like speaking, that are coming out. And I do feel like as a department and a department head that that is saying that he does not have the expertise, and then for us to say you have to be the owner is actually, I think it's really poor leadership on our end to put that onto a director. And if there is somebody out there that will seek advice to the department on a couple of the aspects of running an open source system, but is saying I can take the leadership role because this is a highly technical project, I think we should really lean on, that department head to really take on that leadership role, and how we then support that department to help meet that goal is what we should be doing, and adding and supporting the department head to get there with the Department of Technology. And so I know it's so complicated, because as Commissioner Jung said, it would be ideal if it would be just one department, but it's not. And I'm highly against this potential MOU scenario. It's not that's just makes it even more confusing. So I have to say, I don't know the solution yet, but I just don't think it's smart at all to, as a commission, to say to a department head, to, Director Arntz, that even though you don't have the expertise, since you're going to run the election, to still be the one to
own the project.
To own the project. I think it's a little, that's the part I'm still a little stuck on as well. I don't know if anyone here can help kind of unfold that a little bit, because why would you ask somebody to own something that they don't have the expertise on?
And it's a little bit of a euphemism here. I mean, there's some vagueness in that term ownership, because by ownership, I don't think what Commissioner Jordanek means is we're the end user, we're the customer. It's something more than that. It's some aspect of competence to be able to competently direct the development of it. And that, our director is saying that doesn't exist within the department.
Yeah.
Well, see, but ownership is not the same as developing it. An owner can ask someone to develop it, or an owner can say, these are the things I want to see in the system, and work with other parts of the city to fulfill that. It's not who's going to be doing the technical work. It's who is naming the policy that governs that technical work. This is a project being done for the department. Don't you think the department should be the one that's, deciding what the important aspects of it?
I think we keep changing the definition of ownership, and I think that's the problem that we're having here, is the ownership, what exactly does that mean? And certainly the department needs to have input, because the department needs to tell them how an election works. The commission not only needs to have input, but the commission, between the TAC, especially the TAC, has expertise that can really be useful. And the commission has the ear of some members of the public who have expertise that can really be useful. But I think the term ownership means more than that, providing input. Ownership means you're taking responsibility, you're directing, you're taking the reins of. To me, ownership means taking the reins of. And I think when you look at the grand jury report, or we talk about the problem being no one's really taking the reins of this project, and we want someone to take the reins of the project, and I understand the desire for that because the project is much more likely to get done if someone's taking the reins. But we've got a director here who says, if you give me the reins, I'm just going to be letting the horses run loose. We've got a director of the Department of Technology who says, I know how to lead those horses, let me do it. And I think we need to encourage the Department of Technology, who has that expertise, to take the ownership of the project in terms of who's got the reins.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me,
Sorry if that was a stupid analogy, but.
No, it wasn't stupid. A few years ago, before the whole RFI and RFP came forward, I'm the commissioner who suggested that the department needed a point person to handle some of the technical aspects to even know what it was asking for. That eventually led many years later to what we have now. I still happen to think that is the case that our director couldn't be saying any more clearly, look, he can't do it. He doesn't know what he's doing in this particular regard. He has elections to conduct competently. I mean, it seems like what the department needs is actually someone who's, technically competent, who could kind of help direct specifications. Now, whether you want to call that ownership, I don't know. But, it seems like we do need someone like that within the department to kind of intelligently interact with the ultimate developer. So I guess that might be one avenue, right? So, 95% of what our director has to do is, has nothing to do with what we apparently care about, right? And what we've been spending countless hours over years and years to care about. But he actually does have a mandate, and you might say, oh, well, the charter has this inclusive other matters clause in it, but that's a pretty big stretch of a reading of what his mandate is. I mean, the mandate says conduct elections, and then there's an entire paragraph devoted to defining what conducting elections means, and not one word of that paragraph suggests anything about software development or developing any kind of software or voting system. And that's a big job. He has to do it, and he does it competently. And this department, we need them to do that. He's sitting here right now, and he's telling us that if you place this on me, you're going to cause a train wreck for this other part that I need to do.
Well, but this is why in the resolution that we passed last month, we were asking the city to give the director a project director, and that has this expertise. And until the city provides that position, I think all the blame should be on the city for not funding that. And that's what the draft responses to the civil grand jury say. We're saying until the director has a resource where he can actually effectively work on this project, it's not his fault. And I would never ask the director to have responsibility for something if the city is not giving him the resources that he needs, whether that be through the Department of Technology or a project director that's actually on his staff. So I don't think that any of us are asking him to do something he can't do.
But didn't we have this conversation last meeting about how for a director, head of a department, the Department of Elections, to have a project director that then kind of has to work day to day with a different department was a little too confusing. And I forgot where we went with that comment, but I'm not sure.
I think the idea was that this person would work with all the city departments that were stakeholders,
Yeah.
instead of the director having to do it.
The recruiting for the person.
We just cannot lose sight, and I'm going to just echo what Commissioner Jung said, which was echoing what the director said, which is he's got elections to run, and he's telling us this is going to interfere with that. And absolutely, open source is important, but I know that our electorate would not be happy if we started having problems with running the elections because our attention was devoted somewhere else. And we have to give him the capacity to run the elections. I mean, he's told us that this is problematic, and I think that our resolution, looking at this and having had this discussion and having heard honest feedback from the director, I think our resolution that we passed last month was misguided in this particular sentence. And I think at this stage, right now, maybe someday down the road, things will change. But at this stage, right now, I think we should be amending that resolution, but just to take out that sentence about ownership and asking the city to declare that. We have to take this seriously. It doesn't mean we don't support open source, and it doesn't mean that you guys don't keep doing everything you can to get the director of technology to understand what the project needs, but this ownership aspect was, I think, improvidently taken up by us last month.
Did you guys talk about if the Department of Technology would lead the project or start working on it, a deadline of when it could be piloted, or did that not come up?
The first thing was to hire a project lead. That is in process. And then in terms of an actual timeline or things like that, we hadn't gotten to that point. No. And I guess as long as I have the floor, I guess I would just like to say, certainly, I think part of the a big driver of this was the fact that the civil grand jury report. At least I think this was a big driver of it. Commissioner Jurdonic can provide his feelings on this, but that there was no specific owner. The idea is to have somebody that is declared an owner. The extent to which I don't disagree with Director Arntz that the Director Jurl is very interested in this project today, and I certainly would not want to reduce any motivation there, though my impression of the conversation still, as I mentioned earlier, it was that she wants the department to be the business that provides requirements, et cetera, and at least that's what I would intend the meaning to be in terms of owner. However, given the various concerns here, I can also say that this is something that could be done later if we find that things are wallowing and not moving forward. And so this would obviously this has been a topic of conversation at a lot of commission meetings, and certainly with the ongoing with TAC and discussions with the director both of technology and elections. I think that we can see how that goes. That's also an option. Commissioner Jurdonic, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Okay. I would say that given the extent of this discussion, I would actually like to open for comments by the public again on this motion. So do we have any comments by members of the public? Oh, yes.
So just two minor, just procedural things.
Yes.
So just to clarify my understanding and everyone else's, perhaps, I believe Commissioner Rowe did make a motion previously.
Yes.
And that's still seconded by Commissioner Mogi.
Correct.
And I think it may benefit the public and sort of the comments it wants to make if Commissioner Rowe or Commissioner Mogi want to clarify whether they still intend to make that motion.
Am I able to withdraw the motion?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I withdraw the motion.
Right. So I think that would help the public in understanding where the commissioners are. Maybe that was already
Okay.
abundantly clear from the discussion, but I think there was obviously a pretty substantial discussion after the motion. So,
Okay, and why don't I, so that the public knows where I'm coming from, I'm
Yeah.
going to make a different motion. As I withdraw that one, and the different motion I will make is to amend Open Source Voting Systems Resolution number 2 to delete the sentence on page, well, in the agenda packet, it's page 7. Delete the sentence lines 11 through 12 that reads that the Elections Commission ask the mayor and board of supervisors to name the Department of Elections as the owner of the project. So the motion is to delete that sentence and not add the substitute sentence that's in the packet.
And just to be clear, because I think the interlineation on 13 to 14, at least the way it reads here, that sentence you're talking about actually continues all the way to 17. Is that what you mean?
Oh, you already just the underline.
Well, it goes to the end of the resolution.
Yes, actually, I think we would, okay, thank you, Commissioner Jung. So the motion would be to delete the section, the further resolved section that starts with that the Elections Commission ask the mayor, and also delete the further resolved section.
So you want to delete two
Well-
resolve statements?
Give me a moment, because I'm trying to read the second half of that second further resolve. Some of that still is valid. Okay. So, let me restate the motion from the beginning, if I may. My motion would be to delete the further resolved section that says further resolved that the Elections Commission asked the mayor, et cetera, that entire one. And in the next further resolved sections, to delete the part on line 20 that says who reports to the Director of Elections. So as revised, the sentence would say further resolved that it be the policy of the Elections Commission that the open source voting system project should be led by a dedicated project director / project manager who has experience in agile methods, open source development, elections and voting systems, and the management of technical projects, and who will, and then leave the rest of that. That's my motion.
Can you clarify the first part again? Because I'm.
Yeah, there's a section that reads further resolved that the elections, I'll read the whole thing, and
Yeah.
I'm asking to delete this entire section.
Oh, the whole section.
Yeah,
So from line 11 to line 17?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. I know there is no second. That's what I'm saying.
So we're not saying who should own the project in the resolution?
Correct, based on today's discussion. That's my motion.
Do I have a second, or does this fail for lack of a second?
Why don't we let Commissioner Mogi finish reading?
Okay.
I second.
I mean, my concern with this proposed amendment is that if the Department of Elections is not the owner of the project, then we will not have any formal oversight role, or if the project starts veering in some direction that we're not comfortable with, you know, as we learned at the last meeting, any policy that we pass, the you know, other departments don't have to respect that, and also, you know, we're not guaranteed a level of visibility into the project that we would have if the department were the owner. So those are my main concerns. And, you know, the charter does say that the department, you know, shall be vested over all matters that pertain to elections. And in my mind, this is clearly a topic that does pertain to elections. So I think it should be under our purview and under the Department of Elections' purview.
My concern is that I am now assuming that there's not going to be any language about in the future the commission will like propose who will be the owner, because I that's a little unclear to me. I think we eventually should make some kind of decision instead of just asking. It just seems a little too vague or weak to just say that the policy of, it's for the elections commission, that this policy, that it be the policy of the elections commission that the open source voting system project should be led by a dedicated project director and project manager that has, experience and all this stuff. And so, yeah, if the civil grand jury report says that it's not clear on who is the owner of it, I think we should figure out a solution eventually, even if we can't come up with it today, that there should be a language that says, like, we should, come up with that eventually. Not eventually, but, we should do something a little more proactive, since, yeah, this is a little.
I mean, we're here today because we've been driving this up to this point, and the whole city knows that it's this is coming from the Elections Commission, and that's where all the passion was, and that's where all the leadership is from. And then if we're going to remove this from our purview, then
I certainly am not suggesting we remove it from our purview, not in any way, shape, or form. I think we're going to remain active and involved and continue to do what we're doing.
But in what capacity, though?
The same things we're doing, the same things we have been doing. But the declaring ourselves and the director, the owner, isn't going to change. We weren't the owner before. No one's the owner right now, and we've been doing all this work. We're going to continue doing all this work. But ultimately, the owner of this project is the public. The public is it's the city, and it gets back to this question of what does owner mean. We don't have to be the owner to continue driving this forward and continue advancing it and providing input and doing everything we can to advocate for it. I don't think we need to be the owner of that.
But I mean, when people in city government have questions about the project, I mean, who are they going to go to if there's no owner?
The city is the owner, and who they're going to go to is the people who they've been going to all along, which frankly is you, Commissioner Jordanek, mostly.
Well, no, if this is, well, they don't necessarily come to me, but if the Department of Technology is going to be doing all the work and there's no owner, then I think they're going to go to them.
Maybe not owner, but oversight. So who is going to have some oversight over the Department of Technology to make sure that this project would be completed?
Exactly. They don't meet publicly.
Do we really think that us declaring ourselves the owner gives us oversight over the Department of Technology? I mean, that's just
don't.
not
Well, I think
realistic.
that was the point of the modifications to this.
But no matter what we write here, it doesn't change anything. We don't have oversight over the Department of Technology. They can tell us to pound sand if that's what they decide to do, no matter who we declare ourselves to be.
Well, no, either way, it's kind of a conversation and negotiation with them. But
I agree, and that's what we've been doing, and I suggest that's what we continue doing, making it a conversation and a negotiation without suggesting that we have authority over them that we don't have.
well, then it seems like the problem that the civil grand jury pointed up is going to just continue to remain. I mean, the lack of an owner. I mean, someone's got to be the owner. I mean, do you agree that someone has to be the owner, or you think that no one can own it?
I think the city is the owner.
Well, the civil grand jury did not agree.
What I'm hearing is that our Department of Elections is not qualified to be the owner and believes that being named the owner is going to interfere with their ability to do the primary task of running the elections. And whatever the grand jury says about wanting to name someone the owner or not doesn't change, to me, the department's primary duty here and the feedback we've gotten from our director of elections.
So if I may, the point of this was to try and clarify ownership so that there was a point of contact particularly, and clarify and assure that we continued to have oversight. That was my feeling about this. I think that at this point, to basically strengthen this. I think that to now remove this at this point, it would be ill-advised. If anything, keeping it as it is, as we clarify this with the Department of Technology, we had one meeting. I think that this would be worth another conversation with the Director of Technology as to what ownership would mean, how we would maintain, and be more specific. I think she was very willing and interested in assuring that there was oversight, but I would not be in favor of weakening what is in this resolution if we're not going to strengthen it. Any other comments by commissioners at this time? Comments by members of the public?
One of the things I've been hearing is ownership, and then the Department of Technology is enthusiastic about having ownership of the technological part of this project. And I think it's important to maybe recognize the distinction between having ownership of the project as a whole and having ownership for, hands-on development or whatever else for the technology part of it. And I think it's important to have both. I think one of the problems that this project has had is that there hasn't been somebody with some clear ownership and accountability for ultimately getting things done. And I think there is a lot that the Director of Elections does in terms of contracting with all sorts of entities to do things to help conduct elections. We ask him to get paper ballots, but we don't expect staff at the Department of Elections to go start chopping down trees to get that done. And so I would encourage you to not pass this resolution. I think the real question that I think that is eluding people here is what responsibilities does the Director of Elections have with this, regardless of what label you put on it. And I think that that's something that maybe this Commission needs to work on a little bit more, and I'd suggest that rather than passing this resolution, you just recognize tonight that that's still an outstanding issue for you to do. I think you may have something later on the agenda that will give you another opportunity, maybe in closed session, to address some of those issues. But that's the real issue, is what role does the Director, what are your expectations for the Director of Elections to have with this project? And whatever you find is workable and suitable for that, I think that's something you should decide before you start changing the resolution. And just accept that maybe it does need some changes, or maybe not, but now's not the time to be doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Other members of the public?
Brent Turner with Cavo. So I'm shaken here. First of all, I think we have to ask Director Arntz to resign. You have to terminate him. We have to bring somebody in here that's not going to threaten this commission with overload if they're asked to do their public duty. For him to say that the people of the United States don't want secure election systems, that nobody's calling out for them, is nobody watching the news? We're on the verge of civil unrest in this country, and the president is being accused of conspiring with a foreign entity who's making a mockery of the voting systems that Mr. Arntz is seeking to protect here. So he's foot dragged now for I don't know how many years, close to 10, and I've been saying, you and other experts have been saying, you have to fire John Arntz. He cannot be allowed to hold the United States hostage here in these final moments of our democracy. And this Elections Commission, who's done great work, and the world is watching, cannot fall prey to his tactic of saying if he's charged with his duty to move forward with secure, appropriate elections, free and fair elections, that he's going to fall to pieces. And that's his defense to following the mandate of the county. Is it's too much for him, then please, Mr. Ernst, resign. And let's get somebody in his place right now that can handle his duties, which consider merely outsourcing the technology aspect. If you outsource it to the experts or you outsource it to the Department of Technology and they bring in the experts, there are people, this is not rocket science. So this is voodoo, hocus pocus argument. And I object to it. The people object to it. We were doing pretty well up until this point. But when I hear his threats that it's going to overload him if he's to do his duty to the United States and to this county that he gets paid a good amount of money for and he can't handle it, then let's get somebody that can. And it's as simple as that. To remove the public oversight from the entire operation because at the last minute, Mr. Arntz realizes he's going to have to go to work and now he's going to punt it over the Department of Technology and remove all public oversight and remove this commission. Your duty now is to remove Mr. Arntz. Let us proceed with someone who is technologically competent. He doesn't have to go out and build the software. He just can't play this game anymore. I think we're all victims of a hoax here, and I object. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Other members of the public?
Good evening. I'm Jim Soper. I have been a senior software consultant, sort of sometimes looking at organizational things. What I'm hearing is there's one person with just cause not wanting to take on responsibilities that they can't handle. There's another person saying she can do it and wants to do it. Especially if that person that wants to do it is open to communicating with you, communicating with the Department of Elections, which they certainly must do, but that's sort of obvious, and I think it'll happen. The most important decision is going to be, and who do you go to, is going to be the project manager, project director, the person running it. That's where everybody's going to go to. Yeah, there are some situations where final decision comes down to his boss or her boss. But I think if you get somebody good, the rest of it's going to work out. And I would be more focusing on how do we get somebody really good. That's going to determine the whole thing. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soper. Commissioners, any other discussion? Okay, Secretary Chan, take the vote, please. No.
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 Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think we're done with item 4. Unless there's any other things from the
Actually,
director's
I
report.
wanted to mention one thing on this item.
Sorry? Yes?
So this was an announcement. There is a public hearing at the state capitol on Thursday, July 26th that it's sort of indirectly related to open source voting. It's a public hearing on voting equipment security, and it's held by the Little Hoover Commission. I don't know too much about this commission, but I think it's made up of state legislators, and 2 of the speakers are going to be talking about open source voting. I don't see a San Francisco presence there, but I think it's an important event. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordanek. Actually, yes, the director's report on the open source item, there are a number of points here. I think the the one, this isn't in the open source section, so I will bring it up here, is I just want to point out that there will be a pilot program July 25th to the 27th and 30 and 31 presumably in the basement at the Department of Elections for the leased system. Can you tell us a little more about what that will consist of, Director Arntz? What does a pilot program mean?
So this is an RFP that we issued on February 1st, and the RFP required that any successful bids, the vendors would stage what's called a pilot program. Essentially, it's an interactive demonstration, which allows members of the public to interact and evaluate the systems. And the way the RFP was structured was that members of the public could also their evaluations would go to the scoring of the systems by the selection panel. There's one responsive bidder, which was the Dominion. So we won't be doing the evaluation approach for the pilot program, but this will be a good time for the department to get a sense of how people interact with the equipment, so we can start to get a sense of how we would do outreach, do deployment, and also the system capabilities. So we set up a schedule from 9 to 4 each day, hour increments. So we want to set up structured presentations and interactive demonstrations, and also have capacity that anyone that would walk up could also receive a demonstration. So the vendor was going to send like 6 people to support the pilot program. I sent invitations. Well, you guys got the press release. I know because of your meeting laws, I don't know how you guys are going to do that, so I'll leave it on you. But if you're going to come at a certain time, if you want to have a presentation, let me know. I can schedule it with the vendor. If you can also just walk up if you don't want to do it that way. But I've sent out personalized invitations to everyone in City Hall. Not everyone, but a lot of folks in City Hall, trying to get them to come to the controller, mayor's office, the board members, risk management. I've asked them to come down, city attorney's office, so that everyone starts to get a sense of this new system as it comes. Of course, it's not under contract, so I mean, when I say new system, replacement system, but the contract still needs to be finalized. We're still under negotiation with the vendor, so it has to go through the approval process at the board. That's going to be, who knows what's going to happen there. And then the different aspects of the system we brought out in certain times, like ranked choice voting, for instance. We've designated 2 hours specifically for ranked choice voting, and I'll send the schedule out.
Yeah.
Results reporting. We also were bringing our voters with voting accessibility advisory committee folks in. Our language accessibility folks are coming in. Our poll worker network will be coming in. So it's just like an introduction to the system, but at the same time, as people are learning how to interact with the system, the department's learning about the capabilities of the system. We're also learning what it would take potentially to get the system implemented and also to do outreach to the voters.
So it's going to be a very structured over these days. Is that?
It's going to be everything. So we'll set some structure around it, but at the same time, if people want to walk up and interact with it, certainly we'll support that. The vendor, we've given us a specific list of items we want them to cover in the presentations. But let's say someone comes up, they got 15 minutes. We'll give them a quick look at it. So there's a lot of structure, but at the same time, there's room for a lot of informal presentations and information.
Great. Thank you. Yes, and I'd be very interested in that if you could send that out. I just want to mention one other thing is you did mention here the draft of the job description, and this is essentially at this point, Director Jewell said she was looking for somebody already, but that it's awaiting funding, I believe, right? Is there anything else that's awaiting?
It's not the funding. So the city's budget process, even though July 1st is the new fiscal year, accounts aren't funded until usually mid-August to mid-September. So the position is funded, but the money has not gone into the account yet for the position. So I think that's what's holding her up from actually getting the job description posted on the Department of Human Resources website. The job apps is called, but the Department of Technology does work with Recruiter for technology positions, and that Recruiter's already been out seeking people that potentially would be interested in applying for the position.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. In terms of the next voting system, if there's some part of it that could be made to integrate with open source software in some way, like maybe in auditing or something. Is that something that needs to be negotiated as part of the contract, or would that wait?
We don't know the rest of that's no, it has to be negotiated later on because there's nothing to negotiate at this point. One, there's no specs for a system, so we don't.
No, I meant because you're in contract negotiations right now with the next vendor. So
Right, but we can't identify how any potential integration of an open source or a different voting system would occur with the existing system. We can't have that conversation.
okay, so there's no need to have anything be a part of the current contract negotiations around
No, we'd have to have that conversation at the time.
later. Okay.
Right. But I will say, so this application that could tally the images of the ballots, which we'll post online, the vendor has already indicated that it's open to supporting that. Commissioner Dronick pointed out that its support has to be determined yet because there are certain ways of supporting such an application which may not be truly an open source, which would not create a truly open source application. So, but again, and that application is something that could be spread across the country. It could be applied to all the voting system, all the counties that use the same voting system as we do. So.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to get clarity on whether that was something that needed to be worked out before
For the
you send it.
application?
Yeah.
No,
Before the
it's in the RFP. So the RFP by reference will applies to the contract, and the vendor's already been made aware of this. And they've agreed
Okay,
to it. So.
thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay. Commissioner Secretary Chan, next item, please.
Item 5, review of the open source voting in San Francisco. Discussion and possible action regarding the civil grand jury report, open source voting in San Francisco.
Okay, this is a rather extensive document from the civil grand jury that was provided or conveyed to the Elections Commission, to the mayor, the director of elections, and the controller for response. It's a fairly extensive, I think, rather good overview of some of the challenges with this open source voting initiative. They refer to it as a project, which I think is actually complicates things a bit because it's been more of I would call it an initiative as opposed to a project. It's becoming a project. And then there were specific items that we as a commission, or actually it directs me as president to respond to, but certainly the commission to be considered, and that we should agree on how we will respond. And to that end, we have included here, Commissioner Judonic put together a response that is the basis, that is based on input from TAC as well as discussion at the BOPEC meeting. So that is the result of that. There's one main one, item F19, that we had a different, I think, consider, say, the opposite, agree versus disagree at the BOPEC meeting. Since meeting with Commissioner Jurdonic to reconcile the two, we ended up with a disagree on that one. Other than that, I think that both TAC and BOPEC agreed on the other items. And then I want to point out that in our packet, we also includes a response or a member of the public who provided a draft or their own perspective on this from David Carey, and also there's a response from Cabo regarding Tim Mayer from Cabo with some perspective on the report. So with that, I'll just ask commissioners, any comment, or let me start with Commissioner Jung. Anything to add from BOPEC discussions?
I guess I would just point out that looking at the product that you and Commissioner Jurdonic produced over the weekend, which I appreciate you two doing, seems largely consistent with what we discussed at the BOPEC meeting when we spent that hour and a half going through each of these points. And, I think the responses that you gave are generally fair and reflect what we talked about, save for one point, which was the point that kind of launched this conversation, which was one of the findings related to, what the department's mandate is, and that's where, we turned it over to the director and said, Director, what do you think about this? And the director pointed out that in section 13.104 of the San Francisco Charter, which sets forth the responsibility of the Department of Elections, it's not within the department's mission or mandate, as he phrased it. And so what we had decided at BOPEC together was to phrase it words to the effect, and I don't have it in front of me, but just referencing the charter to refresh my recollection, I think it was words to the effect, disagree to the extent that section 13.104, that nothing in section 13.104, the enumerated duties of conducting an election relate, identify developing a voting system. And I think we left it at that kind of definitional disagreement. When you met with Commissioner Jordanek, you reversed that and you said that it is within the mandate of the department because 13.104 says in one clause that matters pertaining to elections in the city and county. You took that to mean that includes developing voting systems because developing voting systems is a matter pertaining to elections in the city and county. Now, I'd be interested in hearing the director's comments on that. I think that's a generous read to say the least. Not to say that it's certainly important, and I certainly hear the comments of one member of the public, Turner, but what the section actually says is that the department election shall be established to conduct elections, and that the director is vested with the day-to-day conduct and management of the department and of voter registration and matters pertaining to elections in the city and county, and that the director reports to us as the Elections Commission. Then there's an entire paragraph describing what conduct of elections, in other words, that specific mandate of the department means, and that includes voter registration, nomination filing process for candidates, preparation and distribution of voter information, materials, ballots, precinct operations, and vote count, the prevention of fraud in such elections, recount of ballots in cases of challenge or fraud. The director does have a fair point that none of that specifically relates to developing a voting system. Now, one might stretch it, say, prevention of fraud in such elections. I guess that would be the closest thing. But there it takes, kind of one or two leaps of logic to directly connect it. So I just want to point that out, that it's not consistent with what we decided at BOPEC.
Yes, and that is accurate.
Can I ask the Deputy City Attorney, do you have that language in front of you?
Yeah, I have the civil grand jury report and your proposed draft responses.
So under F19,
Yeah.
in your reading, does the phrase developing election systems, is that considered a matter pertaining to elections in the city and county?
I'm flipping back and forth between the report and the draft responses right now. And honestly, I think by mandate, they mean something different than whether the charter provides that authority. If you actually look back to the report itself, when it talks about mandate, this appears at the bottom half of page 16. It actually talks a little bit more, I think, about sort of expertise and capacity rather than legal authority. So I don't think by the word mandate to them necessarily meant, is there a specific provision in the charter or some other city code?
So you think
They
by
could-
mandate they mean expertise?
Something to that effect. If you look back again to the report on page 16, they talk about operation within mandate, and they speak about San Francisco obviously focusing on, San Francisco Department of Elections focusing on local elections, and that there is, sort of distributed expertise. The Department of Elections is obviously very familiar with elections, Department of Technology being more familiar with sort of the, potential software and hardware development associated with the voting system. So I think by mandate it actually means something else than whether there's some section of the charter you could point to. I mean, there is no references to the charter at all in that discussion of the report.
Well, my question was simpler, though. I was just saying, in your reading of the charter, does the phrase developing election systems, is that considered, would you consider that a matter pertaining to elections in the city and county?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, voting systems pertain to elections in the city and county.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, no, and just to put a finer point on it, and I think the city attorney, I think the deputy city attorney doesn't have the benefit of the entire context of the charter in front of him. Maybe he does, but specifically the development of a open source voting system. That's what's referenced here.
Yeah, but I think the larger context of the report and the response to the report, I think we're focusing on the wrong issue. Again, by mandate, I don't think they're saying, can you find me something in the charter or a city code that authorizes this? I think by mandate, they actually mean something different if you read that section of the report. I think that's actually the context.
I actually have one comment on what I prepared, and so I read Mr. Carey's comments, and I actually want to change one part of what we drafted together, what I drafted with President Donaldson, and I think this is something that came up in the BOPEC meeting, and so I think it's something that's going to be of interest to the commission, but this question of whether there is already a project or not. And I think the way that Mr. Carey put it in his feedback was that he thinks it's kind of, we're doing revisionist history by saying that there was never a project. And I actually kind of agree with him. I feel like we've been saying there's a project all along. So I think I would think we should clarify that. And instead of saying there was never a project, I think we should say more specifically what we really mean. And I came up with language that's a few sentences, but to kind of change what we have written there for F1. But do you understand, for the BOPEC members, do you understand what I'm referring to?
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it may kind of come across as kind of sidestepping if we say, well, there was never a project, so.
I think that was just one of the objections. That was just a definition to allow us to disagree without being disagreeable in each and every finding. The findings themselves, they use so many words and phrases that, we found in BOPEC, really we wish would have been phrased a little bit differently to allow us to agree, because that's certainly what I think we wanted to do, given the overall read of the grand jury report. It's just that if you have, kind of imprecise language in each and every finding, like project, without defining what project means, even though you have a separate glossary in an appendix and use that phrase every single time, it just became very tedious. So what's the proposal that you have with respect to project?
Well, I'm proposing that we delete the paragraphs. Let's see, 1, 2. I'm proposing deleting the first 3 paragraphs under F1.
This is your, to clarify, we're looking at your response.
Yes, the draft response. So So these are the paragraphs that kind of say, like one of the sentences, there was never a project to own. I feel like that's sort of sidestepping it. So I'm suggesting that we replace it with a new general note / preamble, and I'll just read what I have here. Regarding making progress on the project, rather than the lack of an owner, the Commission believes that the lack of funding and a commitment from the city to start the project was the main reason for the lack of progress. In its November 18th, 2015 resolution, the Commission encouraged the Mayor and Board of Supervisors to, and then here I quote the resolution, first, hire a project director with technical expertise to be responsible for planning and leading the project, including working with stakeholders, collaborators, and regulators, drafting requirements, and selecting and managing technical contractors as necessary. End quote. However, the city did not provide funding to a resource to lead the project until now, anticipated with the budget signing on August 1st, 2018, and so the department did not have staff or expertise to make progress. So what I did was, I'm basically emphasizing the point that the city never allocated the project lead that we asked for, and so the department was never given the resources. And instead of saying there was never a project, I'm replacing with language to say, well, the city never provided a project lead to actually do something around the project. Because I think there really was a project in the sense that there was a project to kind of like assess to move forward. We never started development, but really, unless you provide a staff person that's has time to actually work on this, of course the project is going to be slow. So that's the suggestion.
And, just relying on Google here, a project is an individual or collaborative enterprise, which certainly this is, that is carefully planned and designed to achieve a particular aim. Now, that's the part where I think that, may not fit exactly with what you're saying, because there was no, specific careful plan and certainly no design, certainly was an aim. So you have 2/3 of that word correct.
This was described as the planning phase for the project, so it's like the first phase. But can I, maybe Director Arntz, in your opinion, was there a project over the past couple years? Or do you think that it never got started?
There's been a policy.
No, I mean from the city's perspective, like the mayor's office. If you ask them, would they say that the project started already, or would they say no, it hasn't started yet? And in your mind too.
And again, there's been a policy. I think everyone's trying to fulfill the policy, and I think what's happening now is that, like I think what Commissioner Jung mentioned, is that the setting of the specifications for the system would be when the project really could begin, and that's when you can start to assign responsibilities and get a sense of what needs to happen. And that's just starting now at this point, and that's what the Department of Technology is undertaking. So, no, I think it's been more of a trying to meet the policies that have been put forward, organizing around that, and then now the specifications will start to get set, and then you could potentially from the specifications start a project.
So you agree that the project hasn't started yet?
Of developing a voting system, yeah, I don't think until the specifications. I think the slalom report would have been the first step of setting the specifications, and then the project manager will go from there.
Okay, well then maybe the language is okay then.
The language as in the draft. I prefer the language in the draft personally.
It's just that we've always, as commissioners, I've always been talking about the open source voting project kind of as if it's happening, but maybe it's more wishful thinking, but okay, that's fine. I'm okay with what we have then.
So rather than go through this question by question, I guess since we've just spent time on this preamble under F1, which is, I think, a clarifying statement around this whole concept of project or not project, and that applies to the rest of the findings. And in discussing this with Commissioner Jordanic, the point is to put this inside of one of these, because if it was just conveyed in a cover letter or outside of one of the findings, it might not make it into a final report. So there's not really parameters to provide other commentary. So that's why it was put into F1. So I guess I would say F1, including that preamble. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about that as it is? Has everyone read it? Or do we still need to?
Can I ask a process question? Is the plan, are we going to go through each one
Well,
by
I
one,
was
or-
intending to take that and not go through each one, actually, on the assumption that the commissioners have read this, and then there's F19, which I think we should discuss specifically, but the remainder I expected not to, unless, I guess I'm kind of thinking of this sort of as a consent calendar. We take this document as a whole. If there's anything anyone wants to pull out, then we would pull that out and discuss it.
I do have one question. At the BOPEC meeting, I suggested that it would be helpful to, because of the vagueness of some of these terms, I suggested it would be helpful to have a representative from the civil grand jury here with us, whether Lori Campbell, Heather Dolan, or someone else. That's the foreperson and secretary respectively. Were those invitations extended and they denied our request, or?
Yes, I contacted the civil grand jury and extended the invitation to Grady, what's his name?
Ward.
The principal author. What was his name? Grady Ward, yes. And he is not in town this week, and so could not come to our commission meeting. He's on vacation, actually. So, and no one else was offered. Furthermore, the 17-18 grand jury is now disbanded, and they were starting with the 18-19 grand jury. So others were not available. So I did reach out to him. That was who was suggested by the secretary of the grand jury, and that was the response I got.
Thank you.
Okay, so if yes,
Could I just add a point of information in response to Commissioner Jung's question?
yes, please.
So I certainly have seen at Board of Supervisors committee meetings where they consider these reports, as well as other commission meetings, members of the grand jury do attend, if they're available, of course, even if the grand jury is formally disbanded. And it is quite helpful, frankly, to have someone from the grand jury there to
Yes.
clarify some of these things. So it would be unprecedented for someone to attend and sort of participate.
Okay. And let me also point out, Deputy City Attorney Shen suggested, the other question from BOPEC was how to respond in terms of protocol. And I was advised that generally it's agree or disagree, and that's it. Maybe you can elaborate, City Attorney Shen.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to the cover letter, and I think Commissioner Jananek also described this in his cover letter to his draft responses. But it is really fairly limited to sort of that 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 you can see on the letter saying what your responses are. I mean, it's agree, disagree, wholly or partially, and that's it, for better or for worse.
So essentially, there's no like agree partially. It's either you agree with it 100% or there's disagreement. And then in whole
Or
or partial.
disagree with it wholly or in part and explain why. So that's
Yes.
the same effect.
I think the biggest problem for me when I was looking at it, there's no option for under the recommendations the recommendation will be implemented with these changes. It's either you're implemented exactly as they stated or not. So,
Well, I think the nearest thing to that is 3.
well, I mean, these are cases where, I mean, we discussed this a little bit, but these are cases where I don't think we need to do further analysis, but we know we'd want to do, we implement it, but not how they stated. So I interpret that to be 4. And just in the
Okay.
explanation, you say how it
you
differs.
would do something an alternative, yeah. Okay. All right. So process-wise, commissioners, is it reasonable to say we would, I think, start with the suggestion of looking at the entire document and then asking if there's anybody that wants to pull any specific items out for further discussion. I'm guessing that Commissioner Jung would like to discuss F-19.
Yeah, I mean, it just is the opposite of what we talked about, so yes.
Okay. Other than F-19, do the commissioners have any concerns with any of the other parts of the document? Okay. So then let's just go right to F-19. We just went over what is in. Do you have a proposed alternative, Commissioner Jung?
Well, I mean, let me just ask you philosophically, how do you feel about us? You know, there's a third possibility here because Deputy City Attorney Shen identified that even though they say mandate, that's actually not what they mean in the context of the civil grand jury report. Actually, what they're talking about is expertise and ability. If that's the case, and I'm not sure if you all agree with that, but if that's the case, one way to deal with it is to make that assumption, embed that assumption in our answer. But, you know, if by mandate they mean kind of like the most common sense definition of mandate, which is permission to do something or order to do something, I mean, governmental departments tend to think of that in terms of law, and that
Right.
the law says what it says, and I guess the philosophical question is: do we, as a commission, want to put forth a disagreement with our own director as to what the director views his department's mandate to be? Now, maybe another answer is to say, well, our department says, charter should be narrowly read. We as a commission view that, public safety purpose of ensuring a, free, fair, functional election means that we need trustworthy electronic voting systems, including open source, and open source voting is one important component of that. Reference our policies and say, therefore we believe that even though not specifically enumerated in the charter, we think that this pertains to a matter relating to the election, and therefore, that's another way to go. But yeah, I mean, it is our director said, no, it's not in our mission, and our mission is derived from the charter, and it's a fair read. I mean, the common sense read of it, of the kinds of items that were called out, do not include developing software to run a voting system. That seems pretty far, not far afield, but it's a little bit of a stretch. And so, you're entitled to make that stretch as you read it, but, not everyone might agree.
Yeah, and I do want to point out in BOPEC that we were also, I think we said yes, but the reading of mandate was, it doesn't say that specifically. However, that at least in my notes, I wrote that we discussed that it also doesn't say you have to buy any election system or use any election system. It says you need to count the votes, and so therefore it's not outside of what the Department of Elections does, but we don't see it specifically as a enumerated responsibility.
Commissioner Jung, do you so to me, the big distinction is whether it's a requirement versus something that's optionally can be included.
What's it? What it are you talking about?
Developing election systems. Is it your view that it's not even in the scope optionally?
I am not sure I understand what you mean.
Well, I agree that the charter does not require the department to develop a voting system. I mean, it can buy one. But do you think that it's not even the charter.
If I can translate, I think what you're saying is the difference between is it within the mandate versus is it within the department's authority, right? So could the department do it if it wanted to, even if it's not part of its mandate? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you take the word mandate out, I think I would agree with your question, because if you replace the word mandate with required, it's not
Okay.
required, but it's under the authority.
Yeah, to me, something the mandate is required, mandatory, but I think that, I'll just comment separately from that, that I think whether you look at Deputy City Attorney Shen's read of what they mean by mandate, or whether you look at the language of the charter, which to me, mandate does mean required. The problem with F19 is the word developing. It's not election systems, because the department does have to do a lot of stuff with election systems, and the problem is it within their either expertise or their charter mandate to develop it. And I think that's the thing that the director is also having trouble with, not on both sides of it. It's not within the charter, and it's also not within his expertise. So to me, I would just agree with the finding, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the legal charter or whether we're talking about the expertise.
Well, I mean, my concern, if we agree, is that not everyone can interpret the word mandate differently. And if someone interprets mandate to mean authority, then someone might think that, whoa, the commission's saying the department doesn't even have the authority to work on this project. And I don't think that's the message we want to send. So I would rather us, clarify within our response what we think the meaning of mandate is.
So to avoid.
I don't have a problem with that. To me, mandate is the same root as mandatory, and I don't really see it as being optional. I see it as a mandate, but I don't have any problem. Well, I guess that the only problem is, as our deputy city attorney pointed out, in the actual response, we don't get to say agree because we understand mandate to mean X, Y, Z. We only get to say agree. And if we want to explain anything, we have to disagree, right?
Right. I mean, I think one thing you could do on this is say disagree partially.
Yes.
And then
If you
provide
mean
an
X, we would
explanation.
agree. So we could say, in order to be able to explain, we could say disagree partially, and then we would say, because we're not sure what you mean by mandate, but if you mean mandate required under the
X,
charter or expertise, then we agree. Okay, so I guess we can't explain just by using the word disagree instead of agree.
Right. So, I mean, basically you have to disagree in some way within their rubric to provide some sort of explanation. So I think we could just do that.
So we could disagree and then define mandate, and then say we would agree if you use X definition of mandate.
And just FYI, looking at California Penal Code Section 933, which is the law cited in the letter specifying this very rigid framework of response, I don't see any reference to agree with finding 1, disagree with it 2, wholly or partially, and explain why. I mean, that's what this 4-person is requesting, but all the penal code requires is that we comment. So that's just my 2-second read of it. It's not, but.
Are you looking at
this-
933.5
Yeah.
in specific?
Yeah, 933C, isn't that what they cite? Yeah,
Well, then they cite to 933.5.
That's in the second part of that sentence,
Oh, okay. Well, let me
or second
take a look.
sentence, actually.
Yeah, 933.5 likewise doesn't say, that just has to do with the grand jury's authority to examine books and records for a special purpose taxing district. Doesn't say anything about agree, disagree, wholly, partially, or whatever they want us to answer in this interrogatory. Again, 2-second read here, but that doesn't appear set forth, at least in the statute.
I agree. Doesn't say anything about the findings.
Is there a more specific regulation on top of that?
Yeah, but I guess the point is, I think we can answer in a common
We have
sense
a- we
way.
have a little leeway.
Which means, whether we say agree or disagree, we can say agree assuming this or disagree assuming this if that makes us feel better. But I don't see how logically that makes a single bit of difference, right? We can just say disagree because of this, but assuming you mean X definition, then yeah, fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
that's just paraphrasing.
I just started to interject, but yeah, so that's just a typo. They cited the wrong section.
Oh, okay.
So it's 9. So this really is the normal procedure. This is not something they came up just with the Elections Commission. So the correct site is 933.05.
Ah.
It's just a typo.
It's a typo.
So this is not some sort of weird torture they're imposing on the Elections Commission. This is actually what they do impose on everyone.
Okay. I'm just going to suggest a couple of word changes here, and maybe this would satisfy everybody. If we change this to disagree partially, and in the first sentence at the end of the first section, we change responsibilities to authority.
It still has that problem with developing, right? We're still saying, I mean, maybe something could be within their authority to develop, but they don't have the resources to develop, and so we're confusing that issue again. If it said it has the authority to oversee or to encourage or to, use, that would be different, but it specifically uses the word develop.
Yeah, I think, what about just saying what you just said? While the law does not name developing, it is, we believe it is in the authority of the department to oversee the development of an election system. So we're qualifying what we mean.
What message are we trying to convey with that? Because it sounds to me like we're back to where we started our debate today. By putting in our, in the official report, they have the authority to oversee the development. Are we back to this who's the owner issue?
Well, my concern is I don't want our response to be interpreted to mean that we think the Department of Elections should not be involved in this process. Because I think what I don't like about a lot of these civil grand jury findings is that they're kind of like narrowly constructed to kind of communicate the answer they want to convey.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't provide the context, it sort of like twists the meaning almost. And this gets back to when Commissioner Jung was saying that some of the language is imprecise. Like, I mean,
I don't
we
have
could
any
say-
exact language in mind, but I'm thinking something that would address both Mr. Shen's comment and the actual charter by saying disagree partially and then say that we agree that the development of a system is not currently within the expertise of the Department of Elections. However, we do believe that the development of an open source system is important, or just the elections, the development of an open source system is important, and that the Department of Elections has the legal authority to remain involved in that or something. Those aren't very well-crafted words, but addressing both aspects of it by saying, yeah, we can be involved, we want to be involved, but we don't currently have that expertise.
Can I try once again, just to get to specific language? Change responsibilities to authority at the end of the first sentence. It would be disagree, or just disagree, or disagree partially. Responsibility becomes authority. That last sentence, to your point, Commissioner Rowe, remove developing uppercase A for an election system is certainly within blah, blah.
I'm sorry, you lost me, so point me
lost me
exactly
too.
where you are. You're under
I
F19.
jumped to the last sentence, where it says, developing an election system is certainly a matter pertaining. And remove developing and just make it, an election system is certainly a matter pertaining. And then we add to this the resolution, which was our 2015 open source resolution, the first resolved that it is the position of the Elections Commission that open source voting systems using paper ballots have the potential for the greatest degree of accessibility, et cetera, et cetera. So qualifying, basically saying that an election system is a matter pertaining, and that such an election system should be basically open source based on what's in the resolution. That's what I would suggest.
I didn't understand the addition of the paper ballot.
Well, I'm just reading what's actually in the resolution. The essence being that, so an election system is certainly a matter pertaining, and developing such a system is consistent with the policy of the Election Commission. That would be the.
And so
That goes
understand.
beyond addressing just the question of mandate or not.
Right. So I understand what you just said, that last sentence. Your edit to the first sentence is to replace responsibilities with
Authority. And I guess the last sentence, we could take it out of, we could use exactly what's in the resolution, or we could simply say, and developing such a system would be consistent with the policy of the San Francisco Election Commission and board and resolutions of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
So, I want to make sure I understood your changes. The only two things you would change are to change the word responsibilities in the second sentence to authority,
Yes.
and then strike the word developing from the third to the last sentence.
I think it's beginning of the last sentence.
Oh, yeah, right, third to the last line, yeah. Okay, and otherwise you'd leave it intact?
Yes. With the addition of a sentence to the effect, developing such a system would be consistent, developing an open source system would be consistent with the policy of the Election Commission and the Board of, and resolutions of the Board of Supervisors.
Can I, again, without necessarily specific language yet, but just suggest an idea that instead of saying it's in the scope of the department's authority to develop the system, we could say, or right now it just says, it implies that that's what we mean, it's within their authority to develop. What if we said something like, it is certainly left, while the law does not name developing election system as a requirement of the Department of Elections, it is certainly of the scope, in the scope of the department's authority to oversee. Now, oversee isn't exactly the right word either, but I'm looking for some sort of phrase that says it's within their authority to, remain involved. Isn't the right word, but that's what Commissioner Jordanek rightly pointed out, that we don't want to imply that we have nothing to do with it, but we also don't want to imply that we're putting on the department's shoulders developing the system. So I think we need to think of some language there.
What if we just said, like, the topic is certainly in the scope of if you just keep it vague? If you.
Yeah, what if we said, instead of it is certainly, we said election systems are within the scope of the department's authority? or
Yeah, I mean,
supporting,
that's fine.
supporting an election, supporting the development of an election system is within the authority, or if you prefer, just the election system is within the authority.
I think just saying election systems are in the scope of the department's authority. Is that what? Yeah,
That works
that's
for
fine.
me. And then do we want to address the idea of expertise that the way Mr. Shen was interpreting it? Should we say that it's not currently within the expertise of the Department of Elections to develop an election system itself?
Well, there is 20. Do you see 20? That kind of covers. If 20 is there, do we need to say more?
Well, I mean, I think Commissioner Rowe is referencing the interpretation that
Oh,
Deputy City Attorney Shen read as with respect to the term mandate.
yeah. I wouldn't object to including another.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, it's basically saying the same thing. Now, just to back up here, the question I posed is, I think the department also needs to respond to F-19. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
And so if for up to me, I would ask the director how he plans to respond. And are you comfortable having, a response that potentially conflicts if his response is,
Then he should give a response consistent with ours.
well, I mean, that's up to him.
Yeah, or it's up to us too. But
So I'm unclear where we're at. So are we
Okay,
striking
let me
it
just
is
pose
and
the
replacing
question.
that with the-
Director Arntz, do you expressed an opinion, a view in BOPEC. Do you have a view now how you intend to respond and whether it's consonant with how the commission intends to articulate its response?
Yeah, I'll stick more closer to the BOPEC view that it's not within the mandate as if interpreted as the duties under the charter or even mandate as Deputy City Attorney Shen put forward. So I don't, as far as authority and all, I'll keep it more objective and just straightforward as far as my response to the issue.
so it sounds like, I mean, what the director just said is it's consistent with what we're saying, but we're kind of adding information to that. He's excluding the part about the authority, but we're going to include that part. So it's not really conflicting.
Well, I think the first sentence, when the way it says, while the law does not name, it sort of sounds like we're saying, and then we change it to authority, sounds like we're saying, technically speaking, the law doesn't say this, but we agree.
Well, no, it's kind of, we're saying that it's not enumerated. It's in the sense of it's, how something might say including but not limited to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the quote is further on, but
Yeah, but the way I heard the director, he's not agreeing with what we're saying.
Right.
The way I heard him is that he intends to respond that
Agreed.
as he reads
Essentially agree.
the charter, this developing an election system is not one of his enumerated duties. Implying period, that it's not within his authority to do. Is that fair? Is that your?
Yes.
I think what we're struggling with, and it comes back to the word, what does mandate mean? And
well,
I think what we're trying to do is say, okay, it's not on our mandate, but development is not on our mandate, but we want to make sure that we're carving out some authority for him. And that's not really the question they're asking. And I think it's raising this sort of confusion that what we're trying to do is not really answer their question.
Well, except that, by mandate, there's no election system mandated, right? It's counting the vote. And the extent to which we believe that an open source voting system is an improvement over a proprietary voting system, that under that and assuring integrity, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean,
No, because it goes back to developing. It's not an election system. It's developing an election system is currently outside of the mandate. And so our discussion keeps acting as if it says election systems are outside of the mandate. But what the director is really concerned about is that developing an election system is outside of the mandate. And we're trying to kind of non-answer the question here. And it seems to me that the answer is that developing, we're stuck with this agree. If you agree, you can't explain why you agree. But we really are agreeing, I think, at least maybe not every member of this commission, but I think a majority of this commission agrees that developing the election system is outside of the mandate.
well, when I look up the word mandate in the dictionary here, it says a command or authorization to act in a particular way. And so that the definition of mandate includes, authorized authority. So I mean, when I read this, I did not interpret it to mean required.
Well, but the chart for two things. One, again, we're talking about developing. I can't stress that enough, and that's the problem here. So is developing a system within the Department of Elections authority? I don't know. It doesn't say that in the charter. And I think that is a pretty broad reading of the charter, and it's certainly beyond what the department could do.
Well, but then we shouldn't have been discussing it these past few years. I mean, honestly, if it's outside the jurisdiction.
We're back to the developing issue, and I hear you just not agreeing with me on whether developing matters in this, and I don't know how many, maybe that's just we have to agree to disagree on this. I am not going to. I am not in the position of not supporting open source. I'm not in the position, I support open source. I want to provide as much resources and ability and support as we possibly can. And so when you say things like that, it sounds like you're trying to pigeonhole me into saying I'm against open source, which I'm not. And I'm not against us helping with open source. I think that's what we want to do, and I think it's consistent with what we've been doing for years and what we will continue doing. I am focusing on the development aspect, which is somebody sitting down and writing software or providing the specs for the software, and that's what the department says it can't do. And so we need to be careful in not falling into the easy outs and sort of scapegoating by saying, oh, well, then you don't support open source, because that's not at all what I or the director is saying.
No, I'm not saying you don't support it. I mean, of course you support it. You've been very, very supportive. But my concern is, I don't think we should interpret the word mandate to narrowly mean, I'm just saying, when I read it, it was the broader interpretation of required or authorized.
But the point I was making right before that was whether we're using authority or requirement, I still don't think development of the system is within either one of those.
Well, but I mean, okay, then I guess we would disagree on that, because I think the department does do some development work. It's very simple, but also, like, purchasing election systems is not enumerated in the charter, or leasing election systems.
Or using one, even.
Yeah, it's not even mentioned, but it's within.
They aren't mentioned, but the language that Commissioner Jung read earlier talked, and I can't quote it exactly, but it talked about the department needing to do the activities required to get the votes and to get the votes counted. And this is different than that. This is not purchasing the paper, which is obviously implicit in being able to run the election. Developing a system is obviously within, obviously we have to have a system. But developing the system is different. It's not necessary to what the department is doing. And I'm more concerned about implying, once again, the language here, I don't think we need to go there. I don't think we need to talk about what is or is not within the authority. I think that we need to address the finding of the grand jury without implying that we're putting this development burden on the shoulders of the department. And And I think we would be better off, personally, saying either, that we agree, or if we want to have an explanation, we say we disagree. However, if this is interpreted as having the expertise, then we would agree. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves and trying to use this grand jury report to describe the contours of a legal duty that is a little bit beyond our capacity right now. Is something in our legal authority or outside our legal authority? If that's not what they're asking, why do we have to go there? Why do we have to make an implication of duties on the director's shoulders that he said he's not?
No,
he's
it's
not
not,
capable
but that's
of doing?
why I'm saying I'm not in favor of saying it's a requirement. I'm saying that it's something that the department can do. But there's one correction I want to make to something you said, and that's developing something does not mean that, his staff people are going to be writing code. I mean, it could mean hiring someone to develop something, or it's not, what I mean?
And that's why I
or
said
overseeing.
right. And I used a broader definition than just that was one of the examples I gave. I think the other one that I gave was, providing specifications or whatever, but all of those things would be within the department. And right now, that's not in his expertise. And it just goes back to the discussion we started with today. Why imply that burden is on the department's shoulders when we don't
it's
have
not,
to?
We're not saying it has to be. It's just whether the department is allowed to do that. That's really, to me, the big.
But that's not the question they're asking.
Well, but when I read mandate, I interpreted it to include that. Is it within the scope of kind of the permissible activities?
You want to talk?
Can I suggest, since we really have to have some sort of disagree in here to have a comment, if that's the protocol?
Well, I would like to hear, if I can, from Deputy
okay.
City Attorney, because I think you were about to comment on that.
Yeah, I think the problem is that we keep circling round and round about what does mandate mean.
Yeah.
And again,
Yes.
And I think really in our explanation, we just need to define what we mean mandate for the purpose of our response. And I think we can be very explicit about it.
Right.
So can I, to that point,
Yeah.
can I suggest that we say disagree partially, and then we, for our purposes, say that, I don't know that we want to define mandate, but say that this is not an enumerated responsibility. However, that it, given that, we can include this language or not, but basically say that it's not, that it is in the scope of the department's authority, and just leave it at that.
Fine.
Can you rephrase? Sorry, restate?
Yes.
Sorry, not rephrase.
Disagree, it would be disagree partially, and say while the law does not name, you could leave that language, name or enumerate developing election system as a, what do they call it? As a
Requirement.
mandate. It is certainly within the scope of the department's authority. And then we can quote this, we can leave this quote in here if you'd like for 13.104 to this section.
I would be okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
And I have to say that substituting the word mandate for expertise certainly would be a very strange use of the English language. So, I mean, even if that's what they intended, they sure did not express it very well.
Yeah.
Okay. So disagree partially. While the law does not mandate developing an election system as a requirement, it is certainly
Why
within
don't we
the
stick
scope of the
closer to what we
department's
said in
authority.
VOPEC? So disagree partially while I would favor saying while section 13.104 of the San Francisco Charter does not enumerate developing an election system as a specific a requirement of the Department of Elections. It is, if you want to say, it's certainly within the scope of their authority or whatever.
Yeah? And then the rest is fine? Or I guess there's the last sentence. I don't know that we need the last sentence.
I don't think the rest of it matters, to be honest.
Excuse me, one more time?
I don't think the rest of it matters, to be honest, other than that one sentence. We're not going to have some legal debate about the import of the charters.
You mean the sentence after the quote?
Yes.
Yeah, you can strike that if that makes
Okay.
people happier.
Yep. Okay. So I took Commissioner Jung's input, while the 13104 City and County of San Francisco Charter does not enumerate developing an election system as a requirement of the Department of Elections. It is certainly in the scope of the department's authority. And then the rest, and strike the last sentence on that one. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Any other of the recommendations or findings that any of the commissioners want to discuss? Seeing none. Do we have a motion to, do we need to vote on this, Deputy City Attorney Shen?
Yeah, I think you probably would need a motion on the entire
On the entire thing, okay?
entire responses to the recommendation, the findings, and also are you? There's no discussion on the recommendations either. Is that
I was just asking if there's any, if any of the commissioners had any discussion on any items further
Yeah.
on findings or the recommendations. But
Yeah, I mean, I hate to rehash subjects that we already discussed tonight, but I would just note for the commission, there's a lot of responses in the recommendation section that refer the department as owner, which obviously we already had some disagreement about tonight. And I would just observe that if the commission doesn't have further edits to this section.
And what specifically did you stuck out to you, if you can find it?
Yeah, so for example, in the draft response there were 4.
R4?
Yeah, R4 to recommendation
There
4.
is, it says as the department.
As the owner.
Department as the owner.
That's also stated in the response to recommendation 9, recommendation 12 as well. So based on the earlier discussion, I imagine, well, I don't want to speak for the commission, but
When is our response to this due?
it's due
60
with, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, 60 days from the date of the transmittal letter, which was,
Late
You know,
end of June.
I should also say I actually
June
need to
29th.
leave in just a couple minutes, unfortunately.
And we're
Okay.
probably not going to have an August meeting, all right?
I was going to suggest we don't have an August meeting, yes.
So if we're going to do it, we need to do it tonight. I mean, we're going to do it, and we have to do it tonight. Unless we have an August meeting.
If we strike as the owner from these statements. Or leave it in.
Which ones were they in? Commit 4, 9?
It was recommendation, response to
it's-
recommendation R4, R9, and R12.
And I would just note, I mean, in the response to several of these recommendations, I guess it's certainly directing the department to do certain things or asking the department to do certain
Yes.
things. And I don't know if
That's right.
I want to ask the director about those.
I think we did, at least with respect to R13.
Yes.
That gave a later due date of January 1st, 2019. My recollection of BOPEC is the director said that was okay. he can correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see. And Commissioner Jordanek, I mean, you're assigning yourself homework in R3, as I assume you're okay with that.
There, honestly, the grand jury was asking us to do so much. I'm not sure they really understand how we work. But yeah, the ones that I agreed with, I thought there were things that we could do. But
And so R11, we should ask that the director, here it says recommends that the department, along with the commission, reach out to 18F and USDS by October 1 to evaluate a possible partnership and to communicate by October 1. Does that seem reasonable, Director Arntz? R11.
Yeah, actually, I think it would be good for Department of Technology to reach out to 18F regarding the development. I wouldn't even know, yeah, so I would have Department of Technology involved in that. I mean, I could make an initial contact, introduce the Department of Technology, and be apprised of the conversation, but I think Department of Technology needs to lead that conversation.
Would you be willing to do that, to send a letter introducing 18F and USDS to Department of Technology to evaluate a possible partnership by October 1?
Yes.
All right, are you okay with that, President Donaldson?
One moment, I'm going to try and get a recording of the rest of the meeting. Excuse me, I missed that. Let me, Commissioner Jung, can you repeat, please?
No problem. So R11 recommends that the department and the commission reach out to 18F and the USDS to evaluate a possible partnership to build open source voting, and directs us to communicate by October 1. I asked the director, what do you think? And he said, well, he's happy to reach out, but that it really should be Technology, Department of Technology, that's the one communicating. So he says, though, that he'd be happy to write a letter by October 1 introducing the Department of Technology to 18F and USDS to evaluate a possible partnership. So that's what I suggest that the response say, R11.
So that would be option 4, which is, it will not be implemented because it is not warranted, reasonable with an explanation. So that would be presenting an alternative.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, they would really have to quibble for that to not be an actual response. But yeah, that's fine too.
Okay, we'll get the exact language off the recording. I'm fine with that. On these others, as I read them,
Why don't we just strike the phrase "as the owner" from each, as you suggested?
yes. Would that be acceptable to the other commissioners?
Yes.
So that's striking it from R4, R9, R12.
And the rest of these obligations that we're suggesting should be taken on by the department, you guys discussed those at BOPEC with the director, and he was okay with those?
Oh, what other ones are you talking about? I thought we covered them all.
Well, they do say, it says should be published, however, they should, for example, on R4, the commission believes that such quarterly reports should be published, however, they should be authored by and published by the department. The commission does not have budget for staffing beyond secretary.
Why don't we ask the director now his view on these various things? So, for instance, Director Arndt's recommendation for what is your position on whether the department should be authorized, should publish quarterly reports on that topic?
I think the project manager that the DTs will be hiring can do that. The department's not the body. I provide monthly updates to the commission already. So I don't know what else I would add.
So your recommendation would say the commission believes that such quarterly reports should be published, however, they should be authored and published by the project manager?
Right.
Okay, and on number 9,
3-1.
or was there one on 3 as well?
Yeah, again, I mean, the commission's has no funding, neither do we, to be maintaining a website for all this work. So by October 1st.
Is there anyone in your mind, Director Arntz, who
I think
could or should do that, or are you just disagreeing with the recommendation altogether?
I mean, it makes sense to have the information posted. I think TAC would be, or the commission's website, since the commission's setting policies for this. And TAC's also a body it's just a matter of posting the information. It's not a matter of actually writing any reports or generating any content.
Are we currently doing that?
There is a TAC website that has information on it. There are public websites. There's nothing officially on this that's part of the record other than TAC and their discussions, and then our own elections commission site with information. RFIs are on the Department of Elections site. So no, I would say that specific to what it's talking about here, the OSV, the TAC is the closest thing, but it is not. I think it would have to be reoriented, let's say, to, I think, address what they're asking for.
So we currently are recommending that we'll ask TAC to do it. However, eventually, it should be maintained by full-time staff under the Department of Elections?
Does that mean the project manager, or are you thinking of a different staff when you say that?
We could specify the project manager.
Considering
I think-
Director Arntz is saying he doesn't have a staff to do it right now. So to say eventually, I guess eventually also means, can it just be years from now and then TAC just does it for a while? So I'm not really clear what the response is saying.
So, as I read these over, and I think that, part of this was that we thought, given what we discussed last month in terms of ownership, and that some of this is with the expectation that we would have declared the department as the owner, I'm actually going to suggest at this point that we do some more analysis on this, and before we necessarily, because we can select item 3 here that says the recommendation requires further analysis with an explanation of the scope of that analysis and timeframes for discussion, not more than 6 months from the release of the report. I'm going to suggest that these, for anything that we cannot agree is definitive. I think the last one, R13, I think we could proceed with that one. I'm going to suggest that these others require some further analysis. I think that and a discussion with, if we're going to say it's the Department of Technology or the project manager, that still would be the Department of Technology if that's where that person's going to be hired. Therefore, I'm going to suggest that.
But I assume R11 we don't have to review again?
We covered that one, so,
I think we could, yeah, we can use,
Oh,
we
we
can
can
cover that
say-
one.
okay.
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll contact 18F and introduce the Department of Technology and support that partnership. I can stay apprised of whatever the communications are.
And that would be by the October 1st, so that would be option 1, correct? Oh, I'm sorry, that's option 4, yes, with that statement.
Yeah.
Then the other ones that have option 4, I'm going to change to option 3.
Okay.
And so if we're doing option 3, then I think our explanation of the scope for each one would be that the scope of the analysis is who is the appropriate person or body to undertake that task,
Yes.
given that the commission doesn't have any staff.
Exactly.
And the time frame for discussion would be within 6 months.
Within 6 months.
I think that's a very good idea.
Okay, so to go through this specifically,
You're welcome to have. No, Don, you want?
so that would be R3 would be option 3. R4 would be option 3. R9 would be option 3. R11 is 4 with the wording we discussed. R12 would be option 3. And R13 would be as is, which is option 1.
6 months down the road, yeah. Right, if I understand correctly.
Is that,
Yes.
so do we agree?
R13?
Was the
fine.
director okay with the recommendation on R13, or did you have different thoughts?
I mean, I don't, the department would be happily, will contact the Secretary of State's office to begin the conversation. If the commission certainly can, I guess, can be a part of that. But getting an MOU set by January 1st, we don't control that.
I think it just
says
says the
should begin.
discussion begins by
Oh,
January.
should begin.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's not a problem. We can do that.
Great.
Okay,
That makes a lot of sense.
okay. All right, so as amended, then, let's see, did we already have a motion?
No.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Any further comments, commissioners? Any comments by members of the public?
Brent Turner with Cavo. Just out of respect for the commission here, I want to tender an objection. Mr. Soper has a habit of following me around to different events in public, and I don't want to play a delay game where I wait for him to speak in front of me, but what his MO is to wait either to run the public part out of time so that he's always speaking right in back of me and undercutting what I say. This is part of a smear campaign by Mr. Soper that has gone on for about 10 years now. And if you want to take a look at a website that he's got posted called Brent Turner Uncovered or Brent Turner something, he's got numerous websites up that do a smear campaign, and he's alleged that I break his crutches and reported me to the police and all sorts of bizarre things in his advocacy for proprietary voting systems and muddying this issue. I just wanted to say that aside from that, and I'll just continue on, that, Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. So we've seen something tonight that was unexpected, where this commission has now caved under the pressure of Mr. Arnst and his disclosing that any burden toward conducting fair and proper elections that would involve him moving toward open source elections, he can't handle, and it would cause a collapse of our next election. That's the threat by Mr. Arndt. So I guess that is the end of the conversation regarding open source systems for the most part, or this particular body having any oversight. I spoke with Grady, by the way, from the civil grand jury, and he professes upon within that conversation to have no expertise regarding open source voting, and he couldn't even find the pioneers of open source voting. So there's no reference to Dr. Juan Gilbert, the only person to successfully deploy a system into a state. He couldn't find him. He could only find 18F and OSET, just like Slalom. And I say we get our money back from Slalom. So I smell a rat here. Not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I smell a rat. It appears to me that Microsoft is still controlling this conversation, that this is a last-ditch effort by Mr. Arntz within a whisper campaign where he's telling the other people of the San Francisco government, he's not going to do this. So he's to blame. We've wasted years and years. He's not going to do it. So the only thing you can do is terminate him, bring in somebody that has the right attitude, and let's move the country forward towards securing the systems. I want to take my last 2 seconds as a moment of silence for children being put in cages by the current administration. I hope you have a lot to think about this evening. Thank you, Mr. Arnst, and thank you to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Other members of the public?
Point of information. My name's Jim Soper. Mr. Turner just said that Dr. Gilbert was not referenced. He's referenced in page 40. And the Prime 3 system is also referenced, and there they also say that that this is the Prime 3 system in New Hampshire, that the system was certified for use in New Hampshire is an unexplained mystery to the civil grand jury. I don't know if you'll communicate it or I'll communicate it. It's not certified, period. It's used, but if to use the word certified, you have to be counting votes, and Prime 3 doesn't count votes. So it's not certified, and why it's a mystery to the civil grand jury, well, there's the answer. The rest of this report, I don't know that we've got a couple of reports for, yeah, we know. Yeah, you know. We need leadership. We need a program manager and all of this, and it's just kind of, well, some people put in an awful lot of time. And yes, you need to respond well, but I just sort of said this, people here who've been involved, they know about it, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soper. Other members of the public? Seeing none, Secretary Chan, will you take the vote, please?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Jung, yes. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Rowe, yes. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. I will make the appropriate changes and convey this back to the civil grand jury. We'll take up the other items, the items that we said were 3 in a future meeting. Next item, please.
Item number 5, Commissioners' reports. Commissioner reports on topics not covered by another item on this agenda: meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities in areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections.
So we already discussed our open source activities outside of this meeting with Commissioner Giordanic.
Timeout.
Timeout. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
so
me
it
too.
appears
then.
that we need to have a brief recess.
Brief recess
Seems.
till 20 after,
Commissioner Rowland.
please.
That was like policing, like.
And, all right, well, I said we would be recessed until, unfortunately.
Oh, you did.
I did.
Good job, President Donaldson.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm going back.
Can we start early?
Are we allowed to
We
start
got
back
4
early?
minutes. I said we would be recessed until 20 after. Do I have to wait?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, then let's proceed. Let's see, we read the item for Commissioner's report, so that's where we're at. I'm not going to ask Secretary Chan to reread that. I was mentioning that I've already covered my activities in terms of meetings with Director Arntz and Director Jewell on open source. That constitutes my activities. Commissioners, anything else to report? Seeing nothing, let's move on to the next. Do I have to have public comment on every item? All right, public comment.
Yes, Brent Turner with Cavo. Again, I'm taken aback because of the news events. I don't know if anybody here is watching the news. There's a 24/7 news cycle occurring on this specific issue. So I would have thought that tonight would have been a good time for a little celebration regarding the fact that the city and county of San Francisco has taken leadership on this issue and positioned ourselves to be the shining beacon light for the country regarding safe and secure elections. But that was before this meeting tonight. So now it appears that the years of work are perhaps not going to be fruitful, as the winner of this event is the one that punts the can down the road. So now 2020 is less likely that we would show any leadership. We're talking about future things and future events happening, and all of a sudden the head of the Department of Elections is admitting to being incompetent, and we're going to reward that by saying, well, he doesn't have to do any more work then, because he has no level of competency. So this is certainly all interesting events, and we're just sort of grappling as the public with where we go from here. Hopefully there is a path forward which can be figured out by this commission. Again, it is sort of counterintuitive to reward a director that says he has no competency. For some reason, the people of New Hampshire, even though Jim Soper just got up here and said that that system is not relevant. It's an open source system. The tabulation piece, by the way, is at the ready. It has not been a completed system. And the software code is certified in Ohio and will be obtaining further certifications, which is a whole other issue that we haven't discussed, is this body getting involved in the certification process for the code, which I don't know if the Department of Technology will be interested in any of that, because, oh, well, they have no public oversight, right, at the Department of Technology. So it looks like we have to go back to the mayor now, since the mayor that was advocating this passed away, because it took so long to get this accomplished. So he passed away. Now, luckily, we have a new mayor that has professed support for this, and a budget person, and the entire board, and the entire county. The only person that is against it, because his California Association of Clerks and Election Officials Association is against open source, and their lobbyist, Barry Brokow, is also a lobbyist for Microsoft. I smell a rat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Before we go on to the next time, I just want to mention that we started this evening on a high note about the June 5th election, and I do want to express that despite perhaps some disagreement about ownership of the project with Director Arntz, I, for one, am very supportive of him executing his duties as the director of our Department of Elections. Seeing no other members of the public, Secretary Chan, next item, please.
Item 6, Director's Report. Director's Report on topics not covered by another item on this agenda.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to draw attention to the non-citizen voting for school board elections. The department did implement this Monday the registration forms, the brochures. We got our websites up and running. We have the contact information that folks can use to ask questions to community groups, nonprofits, regarding potential issues with their status if they were to register and vote for the school board election and they're non-citizens. Also want to give a big thanks to the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs for letting us link to their site. They've done a lot of groundwork already, listing and vetting the organizations that can provide support and advice to potential non-citizen voters. There has been a lot of negative feedback from across the country towards the department regarding the implementation of Prop N. We expected it, otherwise everything is up and running, and we'll have the election this November, and I'll keep the commission apprised of that as we go forward. So that's all I want to draw attention to.
Okay. And for the November election, I assume this will all be covered in your election plan for the November election?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Commissioners, any comments or questions regarding the director's report? Any comments by the public?
Yes, Brent Turner with Cavo. I also worked with some of the kids that turned out to come in and get a tour of the election department during the actual election. One thing that the Philip Randolph group mentioned, and one thing that is obvious to everybody, is there's really nothing to see because, of course, it's all so confusing. Nobody really knows what's going on, including the director of the Department of Elections, because we have a vendor that comes in and takes care of everything, and therefore the director of the Department of Elections has really no place in conducting the election. The vendors come in, and the vendor-trained seasonal workers come in, and they conduct the elections and then tell the director what just happened. So to pretend here tonight like the director is doing a good job, we have to say the vendor is doing a good job, which is why the director does not want to assume any responsibility here, because he's got it pretty good as it is. He just hands the keys to the kingdom over to the vendors during the election cycle, and we hope everything goes okay. Of course, there's no way to tell because no one knows if the counts are correct or not, because the code is secret and no one can look at it. So the reality is no one has any idea right now whether or not the elections are going well. And for President Donaldson to keep commending the Director of Elections for a job well done is preposterous, because we know scientifically we have no idea whether or not the elections are going well. We just know that at the end of the process, there's an announcement of people that are supposedly victorious, and we accept that. So the fact that we were just slightly delayed for a couple weeks and looked a little poor to the press and such, it wasn't fatal, and I appreciate that. And I understand Mr. Arntz is doing the best he can under the circumstances he has. The objection that we have at Cavo is that there are better election systems available for use in the United States, secure, less expensive systems, and we're not using them. And we're not moving expeditiously in that direction. We're now sitting on our hands again, and we're going to see what happens. Well, we've seen what happens so far in the United States when you don't use secure election systems, and we're all suffering that together. So this is quite disappointing tonight, and we are going to continue to call for Director Arntz's removal. We do need to get somebody in his position that knows what they're doing, that knows about elections, like the people in New Hampshire, that I guess are so much smarter than us that they can do it, but we can't. Thank you.
I would suggest, Mr. Turner, thank you for your comments, but I would suggest it would be a good idea, if you want to understand elections, that you actually work one.
I'm sorry?
I would suggest that if you want to understand how the ballots are handled and counted, it would be a good idea to try working as a poll worker.
Thank you for that suggestion.
I've done 15 How many have you done?
Right.
None.
Yes.
Sir.
Thank you for your remarks. Thank you.
Next item, please, Secretary Chan.
Remarks.
Item 7, approval of minutes of previous
Mr.
meeting.
Oracle, why don't you resign?
Discussion and possible action to approve minutes for the June 20th, 2018 Elections Commission meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes from the last meeting? Secretary Chan, call for the vote, please.
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes.
Excuse
Commissioner
me, I think
Jung?
we need to take public comment.
Oh, yes.
And I also
Excuse
just
me.
wanted to note for the record that Mr. Turner is the only member of the public, so when you moved on from the last time, that's because there was no other
Yes.
public.
Apologies. Comments from member of the public?
Yes, after the last outburst by the president, we would like to call for the resignation of Roger Donaldson due to his conflict of interest with Oracle. We've sunshined some of the conversations. It shows a predisposition toward the group Open Source Election Technologist, which is a Mitch Kapoor-backed company. There also seems to be a direct line of conversation with 18F and all the surrounding circumstances that we see that were represented tonight. We see as a concerted effort by Microsoft, 18F, the Open Source Election Technologists Corporation, verified voting, and we object to all these proprietary interests coming in and muddying the waters of this open source project. Since Roger Donaldson is also with Oracle, an employee of Oracle, we request respectfully that he step down as president. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, for that comment, which was not exactly relevant to this item. But can we call for the vote, please, Secretary Chan?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Jung, yes. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Rowe, yes. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Item 8, agenda items for future meetings. Discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas.
I would, on this item, I guess the first off, we will have a BOPEC meeting in September to review the election plan. Would that be ready by the first week of September? Good. Other than that, I would, usually we have a recess in the summer, so I was going to suggest that we take a recess in August. Any objections by the other commissioners? No? Any other items that you would like to see on future agendas?
I have a suggestion, which is I'm the one who called for pulling out open source voting as a separate agenda item. I suggest now rolling that back into Director's Report, item 6, in future meetings. Also, the TAC Advisory Committee update, because Commissioner Jordanek is chairing that. I suggest combining that with commissioners' reports going forward. You don't have to take it, or the suggestion, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, if we can figure out ways to consolidate, though, hopefully, I know that the civil grand jury report actually added a lot of time tonight, but yes, anything we can do to consolidate is a very good idea. Thank you for the suggestions. Any other commissioners, any other items for future agendas?
Can you just remind me when we normally meet for the BOPEC meetings?
It's the first week of the Wednesday of the first week of the month. And I know that there'll be a short week. Where's my phone? So I'm not sure if that's,
Are you talking about September?
Yeah, September 3rd is Labor Day, so
Right.
do we meet on the 5th or are we?
No, they don't. If it falls on a holiday, technically they meet on the next day.
so the
which is
third would be,
Thursday.
so it's the short week, though?
Yeah.
It's that short week.
But it's
So
up to you.
we could meet on the 5th then?
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
that would be the 5th.
So September,
Okay. I thought she said Wednesday.
our next BOPEC meeting is September 5. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Finally, objectives and process for annual performance evaluation for the Director of Elections. I'm sorry, Secretary Chan, I don't know if you
okay.
wanted. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to just quickly mention,
Public comment on the list. Oh. You still need to take public comment.
oh, on the agenda, yes, excuse me. Yes, public comment.
Again.
Yes, Brent Turner with California Association of Voting Officials. I would state for the record that the suggestion that the August meeting does occur and that, in fact, there's scheduled an emergency meeting in conjunction with the regular meeting in order to get some of these issues figured out. I think we have a strict duty to the people of the county, of the city, to the state, to the United States to flesh out some of these issues that are in front of us right now that are in the moment. I don't think the nation, nor the county, nor the state deserves to be put on hold for some of these issues. Apparently, there is quite a good amount of tension around these issues. And again, because we feel the tension is coming from the proprietary intellectual property software community to muddy the waters moving forward of this open source voting project. And this is apparently the last line of defense of the proprietary intellectual corporations to stall this work from moving forward, that this is an emergency crisis situation, and we respectfully request that this commission move forward with an emergency meeting and holds its regular meeting without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any other members of the public? Any other comments, commissioners, then? Okay.
On item 9.
9, yes.
Item
please.
9, objectives and process for annual performance evaluation, Director of Elections. Discussion of possible action regarding the preparation of objectives and process for performance evaluation of the Director of Elections.
So this item, of course, has been ongoing. What I've included here is some comments from, and I've made some changes, as well as included the comments from Commissioner Hill. So I think actually starting from the front page, I've actually realized there's no reason not to bring the review period into line with the fiscal year. So I'm suggesting that this actually goes through June 30th, so as of the end of last month. I took the commission policies and moved them into the first item, and then the rest are as we've had before. Commissioner Hill has provided some feedback in terms of some specific things she would suggest putting into these items. My suggestion here is that I work with Commissioner Hill to perhaps tighten this up, and that we look at it in September. And in September, that we'd actually, at that point, say these are the questions we would evaluate on, and we would ask the director for his feedback, and we would provide our feedback. I think in general, reading through, I think Commissioner Hill's suggestions are good. I think that one of the things we may not have objective criteria for this cycle, but that we use this cycle to come up with objective criteria. So I want to keep this on the agenda just so that we move it forward. And so beyond that, any comments, commissioners, at this time? Seeing none, public comment? Seeing none, I call this meeting of the Election Commission adjourned at 9:35.